Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us at the Pakistan Public Sector Summit, which is being organized by ACC for the first time in Pakistan. Before we formally begin the proceedings of the summit, let us gather some blessings by listening to verses from the first chapter of the Holy Quran, along with its English translation.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم In the name of Allah, who is very merciful, He is especially merciful. الحمد لله رب العالمين. All praise is due to Allah, Lord of the worlds. الرحمن الرحيم. He is entirely merciful, He is especially merciful. مالك يوم الدين. Sovereign of the day of recompense. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. It is you we worship and you we ask for help. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. Guide us to the straight path. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا The path of those upon whom you have bestowed favor, not of those who have evoked your anger, or of those who are astray.
May I now please request all the guests to please rise for Pakistan's national anthem. Thank you. ACC Pakistan is absolutely delighted to host its first public sector summit in Pakistan. My name is Faisal Azim. I'm Head of Education and Public Sector at ACCA, and I'm your host for today. We are joined here today by national and international delegates and intellectuals from public sector organizations, regulators, policymakers, development agencies, academia, accounting organizations, ACCA members, and my very own colleagues from ACC offices in the UK, Middle East, and Pakistan. This event is also being telecasted live to ACCA fraternity across the region. There are over 600 registrants diligently listening to everything that is being said. Therefore, I would request when you're speaking, please be as loud and clear as possible so that the online audience make the best of their participation. This event is extremely important to ACCA, and for that very reason, ACCA's Chief Executive, Helen Brand, has sent a special message to formally welcome the worthy guests.
Hello, I'm Helen Brand, ACCA's Chief Executive, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this first ever Pakistan Public Sector Summit. ACCA has the largest public sector footprint globally of any accountancy body, with some 64,000 ACCA members and students working in the sector around the world. Not surprisingly, they're heavily invested in supporting the sector. Earlier this year, we held our ninth annual International Public Sector Conference in Prague, where we brought together leading lights from across the sector. Speakers there included Samir Ahmed, the Deputy Auditor General of Pakistan, just the latest in a long line of eminent speakers from Pakistan who've contributed to our international public sector events around the world. ACCA works with public sector organisations to support the delivery of excellence in public financial management with a focus on economy, efficiency and effectiveness. Our qualifications are designed to help build the finance capabilities needed by organisations in the public sector to deliver effective financial management and the stewardship of public funds. We greatly value the relationships we enjoy with public sector organisations and regulators across Pakistan. Relationships that are of huge benefit to our members and students in the sector and those beyond it. I would especially like to thank the Auditor General of Pakistan, Comptroller General of Accounts, the Military Accountant General, Higher Education Commission of Pakistan, the Securities and Exchange Commission of Pakistan, the Federal Board of Revenue, the State Bank of Pakistan, the Pakistan Stock Exchange, the Audit Oversight Board, the Board of Investment, the Competition Commission of Pakistan, the Ministry of Finance, the national professional accountancy bodies and higher education institutions in the country, enabling ACCA to play its part in building the accountancy profession Pakistan needs. Given the pace of change and the size of expenditure, it is critical that public sector finance professionals are equipped with the right skills to tackle the challenges ahead. And our qualifications are designed to do just that, to bring the accounting skills and knowledge of those working in the public sector so that there is effective management and stewardship of public funds. In this context, ACCA was delighted to be awarded a high-level project to develop a professional accreditation programme in public financial management, working with the KPK, the Pakistan and Qatar governments. You'll hear more about this important project during the summit. There's much to look forward to as Pakistan moves into
this next exciting phase of public sector development. ACCA is honoured to be playing its part in this. I hope you have a wonderful summit.
Pakistan Public Sector Summit is a continuation of ACCA's international flagship event, the International Public Sector Conference, which we are successfully been running for past 9 years now. And who would be better person to share more about it than my colleague who has specially traveled from London yesterday to grace us on the occasion. Serving as the global head of public sector, Ian Mansfield is responsible for representing ACCA at national and international conferences, engaging with public sector organizations and working across ACCA's network of global offices to deliver the highest quality experience to ACCA public sector members. Prior to joining ACCA, Ian was a senior civil servant at the UK Department for Education. There, he designed the Teaching Excellence Framework, a flagship UK government policy to ensure the highest level of excellence in English higher education. His extensive experience in central government included role in the Department of Business, Innovation and Skills, the Department for International Development and Foreign and Commonwealth Offices, where he served for 2 years as Director of UK Trade and Investment in the Philippines. He is a governor of Bath Spa University and holds a master's and first-class honors degree from the University of Cambridge. May I request Ian to step forward and share his views with us, please. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It is, as Faisal says, a real honor to be here today, to be speaking to such distinguished guests in Pakistan. Last month, thank you. It is a real honor to be here today with such distinguished guests from Pakistan. Last month, we held our 9th International Public Sector Conference, where, as you have heard, we were delighted to have the Deputy Auditor General of Pakistan joining us. And so today, it's with huge pleasure that I take that conference back to Pakistan, one of our most important global countries in which we operate, in order to share some of the highlights of that conference with you. Now, I have 10 minutes to give an overview of a 2-day conference, so we will just be touching on the highlights. But as we continue today, we will be going into more depth in a number of the themes, in particular, bridging the global infrastructure gap and building a 21st century finance function. Yes, thank you. Apologies. So just briefly, ACCA's global reach in numbers. Over 200,000 members and over 500,000 students in 179 countries. And key to our success is delivery through partners. Through over 7,000 approved employers and nearly 300 approved learning partners, several of which are represented here in this room today, and many others of whom will be listening over live streaming, which is going on as we speak. 101 offices and centres in 53 countries, and with over 5,000 members and several times that number of students, Pakistan is, as I said, an extremely important market for ACCA, and we're delighted to have been here for coming up to 30 years now. Now, our conference is a truly global event. The last 3 we've had Johannesburg, Singapore, and Prague, 3 different continents, but all of them celebrating the best in international public sector finance. And the conference, we always say, is not just a one-day event, but it's part of a journey. And this event here is part of that journey. The theme we took was a sustainable public sector. And we interpreted sustainable in a broad sense, sustainable in finance, sustainable in talent, sustainable in terms of the contribution that PFM makes to achieving the sustainable development goals. And we have 3 main themes throughout that event. The first of those was what we called accountants on the front line. And we looked at auditor generals and directors, and we looked at how ordinary accountants at all sorts of levels, from the junior to the senior, can play an important role in tackling serious organised crime and corruption. We looked at developing the global profession in terms of building a 21st century finance function, both in terms of public sector organisations and in terms of the role the public sector plays as a regulator, building the profession in the country as a whole. And then we looked at ongoing trends. Where is the public sector going in the future? And in particular, we looked at digital and we looked at the global economic conditions and the impact of those on the public sector. Now, I'm sure you recognize one of the individuals in this picture. And I think this was a unique opportunity to have 4 Auditor Generals or Deputy Auditor Generals on stage together from different continents, speaking frankly about the challenges that they face in their organization. These are world leaders in their field. We've got Nigeria, Tanzania, Pakistan, and Jamaica represented here. And it was really fantastic to hear them discuss openly. I was fortunate to join them for lunch as well, when they were able to speak even more sort of openly and freeform about some of the challenges they face. And they drew out three absolutely critical ones. The first was on independence. And I was very fortunate to be speaking to the Prime Minister's advisor just 5 minutes ago, who was also speaking about the importance of the independence of the Supreme Audit Institution in Pakistan. And one of the things that came up from this conversation, I think it was the gentleman from Tanzania who said this, was that you can have independence in law, but if your budget and your resources are controlled tightly by the finance ministry, then how much good does that independence really do you? And so independence is a complex process here. It's not a simple answer of writing it into the Constitution. The other one was next was inadequate resources. And this wasn't just money, this was talent. This was digitalization. This was computers. This was understanding how to put the resources to good use. And then finally, because we spoke about maybe some of the challenges, there was an inspiring conversation about how good audit processes can support the SDGs. And ACCA actually has a report on this coming out in September, building on our work globally, looking at how good measurement and audit processes can support and track a country's process towards achieving those sustainable development goals. Our next session here was actually about the role of tackling a really important problem, which is corruption, which is money laundering, which is serious organized crime. And we have some inspiring speakers from Northern Ireland, from Ghana. The lady second from the left is actually an ACCA member, and she is also head of the Ghana CID, Criminal Investigation Department. And so she knows a lot about tackling crooks and locking them up. And actually the thing that people were saying here was that tackling corruption is everyone's job. So as for anyone in the course of their work may come across a case of corruption and fraud, and it's only when everyone sees it as their duty to report that, to tackle it, and not pass it up, that we will truly be able to get a handle and to stop these issues from occurring. We also heard about the huge economic costs of this globally. Eliminating this could really boost global GDP by 5, even 10%. This slide here is from the head of finance for the UK Civil Service, which his key slogan is putting finance at the heart of decision making. And this is, accountants are not bean counters. They don't just keep the figures. An institution in the public sector that uses accountants well will have them involved in decision making, in strategy, and in setting the course of direction for that institution throughout, from the beginning of projects to the end. And actually, how do you make sure your accountants have the skills to do this, have the talent, have the training, and are situated in the right place organizationally within the hierarchies that allows them to do so? Because finance is not something to be tacked on at the end. Finance is at the heart of our decisions. Now, these trends here are from Estonia and from Canada, two nations which I think are renowned as leading the way in terms of digitalization. The two are quite different. In Canada, we looked at a city, one of the largest municipalities, and the CFO who has introduced a whole range of reforms to make it a smart city. Everything from the sewage system to the public transport to how the citizens pay their taxes. Estonia was even more amazing. Estonia has something like 3 million people in it. Its GDP is probably less than the GDP of Lahore. And yet they have created a bespoke digitalized system with a tiny budget compared to, say, the state budget of Pakistan or the UK, that is bringing all of these services online by 2020. They've already done a similar number, which they did in 2016 and 2017. And the citizens of Estonia can do everything digitally: buying a car, starting school, changing residence, retirement, building houses, all online. Really amazing. And it's where things are going. They are blazing the way, but it's where we will all be in 5 years, 10 years' time. And how do we adjust as accountants in order to support this if actually all that information which we would use, that we would audit, is coming through a computer? This one here was looking at our Global Economic Conditions Survey. Those of you who are not registered for the ACCA Professional Insights app, I would certainly encourage you to do so, because this Economic Conditions Survey is the largest survey of accountants globally, and it has served as an excellent forerunner for things like global GDP growth. We produce it by country, by region. A huge amount of information that comes out of this purely by asking professionals a range of detailed questions. We had some great conversations. We were in Prague about European bond yields and demographic forecasts. I think, you know, Pakistan has 60% of its population under 25. That demography looks quite different if you're sitting in Prague. So some real challenges for Europe there, as well as for countries such as Japan and even China. We can see the way China will still be a superpower, but we can see in the way Chinese growth is falling, which affects the whole world, some of the changes of that demography as their one-child policy starts shifting through and affecting their forecast growth for the economy. And then finally, I will leave you with these 5 key takeaways, which were what we took away from the summit, and we will be exploring some of these further this morning. Number 1, sustainability is about more than money. And we all know public sector finances are under pressure, but it does no good to balance the budget if at the same time you're not investing for the future, you're not building the talent you need, and you're not thinking about what impact is public spending having on the wider sustainability of your country. There is, of course, an increasing pressure to do more with less, and this links into the next one about digitalization. And that's digitalization in terms of the public's access to this, how they pay taxes, but it's also about the roles of, for example, machine learning, AI, blockchain, robotic process automation on the finance function itself. One of the key questions was, how do you build future talent if all the basic tasks are being done by robots? This is a real question. What do the new graduates do that allows them to develop their skills to move up the organization? The competition for talent will increase, and we will look at this further today, and we will look at an important step that the government of Pakistan is taking in partnership with ACCA in terms of building that talent. And this final one, if I leave you with no other thought, it would be this one, that accountants need to be at the heart of decision making if we are really going to have the top quality public financial management in a country. Thank you very, very much indeed.
Whilst Ian is still here, we would like to hear more about the latest research that we have published on the infrastructure gap. So Ian, we were just bringing forward your session just to manage some timing issues.
Of course, and thank you very much. So this, you will see some of the highlights from this report on the large posters around the room. And it is, how can accountants help bridge the global infrastructure gap? This was launched at our conference last month in Prague. You can find it online, and you can find more information about it in your packs through the short summary. After this, we will be having a panel discussion with some distinguished experts from Pakistan and my colleague Zarif Ludin as well, who will be debating some of the findings. So I will start by giving you a 10 to 15 minute overview of some of the key things that we found. So, how did we conduct this research? Well, we had a survey with over 3,600 professional accountants working in public sector infrastructure responding. You can see here, and we had 259 from Pakistan. Now, this means that almost half of our public sector members in Pakistan completed our survey. So it gives a really good impression of what the finance experts think about the public sector. As well as the survey, we carried out economic analysis, and we held a series of case studies in a large number of countries around the world in order to build the evidence base for this report. Now, what do we actually mean by the global infrastructure gap? There are two approaches to quantifying this. The first is analytical. It says, okay, the top quarter of countries in a particular sector have probably got the infrastructure they need there. So what we do is we look at what would it take for the whole world to move up to the top quarter of infrastructure that's needed. And this can be calculated analytically, and we do so, and we present some of the figures for that. The second approach is, I think, more interesting. It says, well, actually, infrastructure is about meeting a need, and this may be very different in one country to another. You know, Canada probably has more need for railways than the United Arab Emirates, for example. There's questions of geography that come into this. So actually, this is about perception of need. So the second approach is to be asking professionals how much more investment is needed in your country in certain sectors. And this one is a bit more about survey explored, and it provides a really, really interesting approach to where it allows you to drill down to a sectoral level of what is needed in terms of that. Now, globally, we have this, which is the first one, and it basically shows there is a gap, and that gap is increasing. And that is the key takeaway from this graph. Governments around the world are not investing enough in infrastructure to meet the needs of an expanding population with increasing demands. This sort of assumes that GDP continues growing at a consistent rate, and that investment stays the same as a proportion of that GDP. We need to up our game, and when I say we, I mean almost everyone. The one exception to this is a couple of countries like Canada and also the Middle East, because when we look globally, the Middle East have, obviously not all of the Middle East, but some parts of the Middle East actually have the smallest infrastructure gap, and Africa has the largest. And I'll come into a little bit more on how just the size of that infrastructure gap isn't the only thing that matters. There's also an important question about the ability of a country to respond. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide, so you can come back to it, and it's all in the report, because this is the global approach. But I think it's more interesting here to focus on Pakistan. As I say, we had a good, really good, over 250 respondents from Pakistan. And what it does is it looks at 6 sectors, and it says, is what's needed adequate, good, very good, or not adequate? You can see there are some real differences in here. So roads and highways and ICT, especially ICT actually, but both of these, Pakistan is coming off really, really quite good. And I will just flip back to the previous one. So on both of these, it's essentially at global levels of satisfaction. People don't think too much more is invested. Okay, I've not driven all over Pakistan. I've only been in the country just over 24 hours. My impression of your roads and highways were that they were indeed very, very good, at least certainly around Islamabad. But this is obviously from experts, not from someone who's just been in the country 24 hours. Where does it show that more work is needed? Well, water and sanitation, and railways, and power and energy. And actually, this provides a really, really useful way of a country looking at what is needed, which sectors are needed, and then how does that benchmark against global comparisons? So if we go back to the global one, actually, you will see that some things, railways don't seem to be very good in a lot of places. But actually, power and energy, some countries are doing very, very well on this sort of mechanism. And then it allows us to take it down to the next level. And I won't presume to do this, but maybe our panel can get into this. Why are some of these areas in Pakistan showing global quality and others are lagging? And there's some really interesting questions on that, and it helps a government identify need, and it helps identify barriers. And I could pull up any other country, UK, I could pull up India, I could pull up Malaysia, and they would all show a different pattern. Everyone has some areas they're strong, some areas which are less. But this slide is also really interesting, and it's about government capacity to respond. And this crucially, there are 3 key numbers here for each country. There's how much are you investing now, there's government debt, and there's tax revenue as a share of GDP. How much you're investing now kind of says, well, you need to do more. UK and Pakistan are perhaps united in not really being in a great place on this, 1.6% and 1.7% of GDP. I mean, let's compare this with, say, I mean, we know China is investing loads, but let's compare it with, say, Malaysia or Nigeria. They're spending significantly more than the UK and Pakistan as a share of GDP. And that's the sort of thing which in the long run, in 10 years, 20 years, will have an impact. So I think this is the sort of thing which should really actually serve as a message. We need to do more. But then let's look at how you can, what are the constraints on this? And it's interesting, the UK and Pakistan are opposites here, because we each have one strength and one area which is more of a weakness. So on debt, you are in a much better place. Government debt, 63%, UK 111%. These figures are maybe slightly different from what are normally shown on the government ones, because it uses a World Bank method to consider some debts which are normally kept off balance sheet. For example, public-private partnerships and various other debts which are not always used, UK student loans, for example. UK is more than twice as indebted as Pakistan, and that places a real constraint on our ability to invest more. But then the other side of this is the tax base. So Pakistan has 16% of GDP as a tax base, UK has 32%. So on this, we're taking in more tax, we have a more effective tax system, so maybe we can have more ability there. If you match them both up, ideally we would be less indebted. You are looking at growing your tax base, and I know that's an important priority for your government anyway. So in a sense, this isn't really telling you anything you don't know about your own country. But the insights to go forward is in looking at different countries and seeing how do the constraints vary between them. Because we're all constrained and nearly everyone needs to do more, except perhaps China. I'm now going to look at the barriers and then move on briefly to consider how are the three ways in which accountants can play a role. And that last part will be explored more by our panel. Again, we have global things, but let us look here at South Asia, because that's the region we're in now. And we can see here that the two really dominant ones are seen as the biggest barriers to meeting the infrastructure needs are political leadership and corruption. And we can see how this plays out beyond the accountancy of the world. Because at your recent election, a new prime minister was elected on the platform of providing political leadership and tackling corruption. And if this chart shows, well, there's no surprise that he won then, because he was standing on the platform to tackle two of the biggest barriers to meeting the infrastructure needs, and infrastructure affects everyone. So you can see why the Prime Minister's agenda here is really addressing some of the very important barriers to this. There are also others which are needed, so planning and regulatory barriers and lack of finance or funding. But interestingly, if people are not saying the skills and talent shortages or the lack of competition issues. That is interesting because there are other areas, say Africa or the Caribbean, where skills and talent are much, much stronger. People in Pakistan are feeling that we have the skills we need to address some of these challenges. It just needs the political leadership and the tackling corruption to unlock that huge reservoir of skilled people that you have and allow the infrastructure to proceed. Now, the role of the accountant, because infrastructure isn't just about accountants, it's about lots of people, but we're accountants, and so we're going to talk about what can we do. Number one, selecting projects. So, the accountant has a critical role in selecting projects, because actually, number one is removing political decision-making, making the process technocratic. Well, how do we do that? Well, to do that, the politicians must feel they can have confidence in the technical advisors. How do they do that? Well, they need to be well-trained, they need to have experience, they need to be able to present information on costs and benefits rigorously that will satisfy the politicians and, of course, the people to whom the politicians are accountable. And getting the accountancy right, getting finance professionals to do this is absolutely essential, because if politicians can't trust the numbers, well, why should they listen to the experts? Absolutely important. And then if we look at the next one, standard assessment tools to evaluate projects, mechanisms to tackle corruption, quantifying the total life cycle costs of potential projects. All things which clearly accountants can play an absolutely critical role in addressing. Now, the next one is around financing projects. And I'm just going to leave you with one thought here, that we have institutional investors with $80 trillion under management worldwide, and we have a 14 trillion infrastructure gap. This number here, the money under management, is more than 5 times bigger than the infrastructure gap. If we could get just 20% of that money to be going into infrastructure, problem solved. Now that's not easy to solve, but who do you think is going to be able to talk to these institutional investors to put in place the systems, the structures, and so forth that can channel that money? It will be accountants. And actually, the old days where you just raised some money from taxation and you spent it, or you borrowed some money from an aid agency and spent it, that is not going to be enough to unlock the infrastructure that we need. And I've heard about some really interesting initiatives here in Pakistan about how the government is crowdsourcing infrastructure. I think that's absolutely fascinating, and it's already raised tens of millions of dollars from my understanding. And that's just one example of how new and innovative fundraising mechanisms can be used to mobilize some of this money, which is there sitting in the hands of businesses, pension funds, and other institutional investors. And then finally, we have the public-private partnership here. And public-private partnerships can be incredibly effective, but they can also be disastrous. And we've had some really major public sector scandals in the UK recently. And when we at the public sector conference, we also heard of other ones in both Africa and Canada where things have not gone well. And when they don't go well, we see bankruptcies, we see jobs losses, we see huge amounts of public waste. This is not to say that public-private partnerships are not good or cannot be an absolutely vital role in delivering it. But it does say it's complex, and you need to get it right. Because there is a third person in the mix. There's the owner, the contractor, and there's the investor. And structuring these effectively is vital. And the role of the accountant in drawing up rigorous contracts, in working out how to share risks, in providing oversight, in understanding the commercial drivers of the public sector, of the private sector, is absolutely vital. And increasingly, we are seeing governments look for accountants who have experience in both the public sector and the private sector in order to lead the work on these projects. To just briefly pick up that circle 2, barrier 2, it was really interesting from our survey where we had the public sector and the private sector accountants, and they showed some real differences in where each side added value. In particular, the public sector accountants said that the real advantage of doing public-private partnerships for the private sector was that it provided a stable and long-term source of revenue, and the stability was really good. The private sector didn't see it as stable at all. They saw their big risks in going into a partnership with the public sector, with political leadership changes, and all sorts of other things. Things like that just show that we need to understand it, because actually, if 2 sides are going in with a different set of risks, how are they going to structure the contract appropriately to deliver value for both sides? And there's another one, monitoring and oversight. You can't just hand over a project to the private sector and forget about it. You need to be closely involved in managing it. Otherwise, you're storing up big problems for the future. All of this says we need more financial skills in government, better financial skills, and financial skills, if I return to that earlier theme, at the heart of decision making, if we're going to deliver public-private partnerships and other new and novel means of financing infrastructure effectively as we go forward. Now, I will now be closing here and to say thank you. This is an oversight, but I think the real value from this session will come from our discussion by our distinguished panel, which will be coming up. And I will hand back to Basil to introduce the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian, and thanks for sharing ACCA's latest piece of professional insights. I just wanted to mention here that ACCA spends a large chunk of capital each year in producing these reports. Being a research-based organization, these professional insights are an important source for ACCA to play its part in developing the finance profession globally. I would also like to mention that we have over 200 online attendees listening to this conversation. So I'm very thankful to all those listeners, because it's not easy to stay online and listen to something which is more practical and which is easily understandable on a face-to-face attendance. Our next speaker today is also a keynote speaker, a man with a lot of intellectual capabilities. In recognition of his meritorious services, he was conferred the prestigious award of Hilal-e-Imtiaz, and later the highest civilian award of Nishan-e-Imtiaz for his outstanding public service. I'm absolutely honored to invite on stage the educationist, the economist, the banker, the policymaker, the leader, and one of the most respectable advisor to the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Dr. Ishrat Hussain. Sir, can you please step forward?
First of all, let me thank ACCA for inviting me to this particular event. And I'm attracted to this event because of the ongoing work which my task force, which I'm heading, and the government is engaged in, which is the institutional reforms in which the public financial management is one of the key elements. So for me, it's a learning experience as to what is really happening elsewhere. And this interaction between international experts and our own Pakistani experts is something which would be very helpful for carrying out these reforms. I would concentrate right now on what we're trying to do as the public financial management is concerned. The first and the foremost endeavor of this government is that we should have an integrated database in which all transactions which take place between the government departments, the ministries, the statutory corporations, the public companies which are owned by the government, and all other activities are under one particular data warehouse. And not only that the transactions are recorded and you get a picture of what has happened during any particular period, but also it generates reports which are timely in order to assist in the decision-making process. And I think that is what our endeavor is. We had the World Bank helping us in what was called as PIFRA, which goes all the way from the center down to the district level. And now we are going to the second stage, which is extending the scope of this in order to have a mechanism whereby you're looking at a consistent set of timely information which you use for your budgeting, for your planning, for the cash flow management of the government, and the releases of funds. So you're not guessing as to what is really happening, but you're using hard data and numbers in order to make your judgment calls. And this will be a shared resource, right from the Ministry of Finance down to the last unit of decision making. And we're working with the Auditor General of Pakistan and the Controller General of Accounts and the Ministry of Finance in order to have a complete digitization in place by 2020. And this is a work which is on the way. Our second attempt is to have a legal framework and a strategy for public finance management. And the Minister of Finance has finalized the public finance law and the strategy which will be presented to the Parliament. Because once you have the parliamentary approval, its sustainability beyond the current electoral cycle is ensured. Because in finance, you need some kind of certainty that these reforms will not be reversed with a change in the government. And that's what we are trying to do, is to have a legal instrument of the public finance management law, which we would take to the Parliament along with the strategy. The third aspect is the centralization of powers from the Ministry of Finance, which has a lot of control at this stage, to the respective ministries. After all, we have very senior officers as the secretaries to the government, who are also the principal accounting officer. So we're strengthening their own capacity by appointing a chief finance and accounting officer in each ministry, who will be assisting the secretary as far as the budgeting, the planning of the projects, the execution, monitoring, and also reporting. So all these functions will be decentralized to the ministry. And the ministry will be given two-line budget. One is the employee-related budget, all the expenses relating to salaries, allowances, pensions. And they cannot create any new liabilities for the future. But within that budget, the ministry can carry out whatever they want to do. If they want to use some of the savings by not hiring the regular staff, but they want to have short-term consultants because they need expertise in particular issues, they can utilize that resource in order to fund the consultants. So we are providing flexibility to the ministries concerned, so they don't have to run for every little reappropriation of funds to the finance. And that delays, and that also dilutes the accountability of the ministry. And the second component of the budget, which will also be one-liner, will be all the operational expenses. And those expenses will be related to the goals which you have in the medium-term budgeting framework. So you will have annual, what I call in the popular terms, a kind of business plan that the Ministry of Power is going to deliver the following goals. And this is the financial resources, and these are the human resources which will be available to them. Then they can do whatever they like within that budget head of operational expenses. They want to cut down on the motor vehicle expenses, but they want to increase their software application expenses in order to create capacity for monitoring and reporting, and they can do it. They would be quite free to do that. So this delegation of financial powers from the Ministry of Finance is something which we are proposing as part of the reforms. At the same time, right now, the
flow of funds from the time of the approval to the actual payment is highly convoluted. So we are trying to convince the Controller General of Accounts to transfer the powers of the pre-audit to the Chief Financial and Account Officer, which resides in the ministry, and therefore we have to redesign the business process in order to cut down on this time which is taken for the cash management of the government, and which creates a lot of delays. You talk to a contractor and he says, I have to jack up my prices by 10 to 15% because I won't get the payments in time, and therefore I have to borrow this money from the banks in order to carry out my functions. That's the response we get from the private sector who are dealing with the government. Therefore, we're not getting value for money, we're actually getting more expensive goods and services for the government. So we have to carry out a business process reengineering in order to cut down on the steps and also the time. And on the institutional side, we are trying to transform the Auditor General's office into an autonomous, independent, supreme audit institution. But that requires a transformation in the skill mix. And we are emphasizing that there will be more qualified, certified accountants of the various nature. For example, we are now moving into the digitalization. So we should have more CISA qualified accountants within the Auditor General's office. So it is professionalization, competencies and skill mix, digitalization and automation of the processes, and risk-based auditing. Right now, we have a very haphazard selection of the audits, where you start with 15,000 audit paras, and you spend enormous amount of financial and human resources. But when it goes to the Public Accounts Committee, it's only 400. So there is a lot of weeding out which takes place, which is highly discretionary. So while building in the risk parameters, you will be able to have the value for money as your indicator in order to present the findings of the audit, so it becomes more effective, and also give signals to the spending ministries that these are the areas where they have to keep a watch and keep vigilance, so those risks are mitigated. So it's also a feedback from the audit Public Accounts Committee observations to the spending ministries. So we're working with the Auditor General's office, and we hope that in a few months' time, we would have a reform agenda which will then be implemented in the Auditor General's office. I'm quite glad that ACCA has launched this advanced diploma in public financial management, and I would very much like them to work with our Public Finance Institute, which already exists, so that there is no overlapping or duplication, but there is synergies between the two, because you bring in the international and global experience, which should inform the contents, the delivery, the pedagogical tools of our public finance accountants. So ACCA has a role to play, and I hope that you would help in the capacity building in the competency matrices, and in order to engage in conversation, which is ongoing conversation, as to how international best practices can be utilized and adapted for the reforms of our Auditor General's office. I wish to thank you very much again for inviting me to this occasion, and I hope that you will continue to extend your help to Pakistan in various ways at various times. Thank you very much.
Next up, can you please stay on the stage for us, sir? And can I request Mr. Ian Mansfield and Mr. Sajid Aslam, head of ACCA Pakistan, to please step forward and present Dr. Irshad Hussain with a token of our appreciation, please. And we will be taking a group photograph with Dr. Irshad Hussain. May I also request our senior colleagues, Mr. Arif Masood Mirza, if you could please also step forward for the group photograph along with Mr. Zarif Loden, Mr. Asad Hamid, and Mr. Hamad. And this takes us very nicely to our first panel discussion, which is themed on the infrastructure report that Ian shared earlier. Mr. Arif Masood Mirza, who's the moderator of the first panel, is ACCA's regional head of policy for Middle East and South Asia region. May I please request Mr. Arif Masood Mirza to step forward and take the stage for us, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning to everybody. Let me just invite the panelists. They're in no particular order. So, Mr. Ilan Goven, who is the country head of World Bank, kindly join me. Mr. Saran Amin, Executive Director at NECRA, Unbelievable Abbas, Parliamentary Secretary for Foreign Affairs, and my colleague Zarif Loden, who's the head of market partnerships for ACCA. Right, thank you all very much for joining us for this panel discussion. I'll try my very best to ensure that we can make it energetic and exciting and, share our experiences. Just going back to what was covered in Ian's presentation, for those of you who joined us late, the infrastructure gap really identifies, on the one hand, a quantifiable gap between our, if I use Pakistan as a reference point, the gap between our infrastructure and those other nations which have a much higher level of investment in infrastructure gap. So there's a quantifiable gap there, which may be aspirational, but then there's a service gap as well. So if we ask our own members of the public what they need, and that will also give us a service level gap. So there's those two reference points. So my first question is really basic one, and then you also remind the audience and the panelists that the three main values that were revealed by the report, one was the lack in political leadership and vision, as one point, so there's a leadership capacity issue there. One was in financing the infrastructure gap, so we don't really have the government funding to cover the gap. We need to look elsewhere as well. And that's where the multilateral agencies like yourself come in. And then there's the planning and regulatory barrier as well. So that's where probably some market adds some value. So I think we've got good representation that will address all the barriers here on the panel. So my first question, and again, this is in no order of preference in terms of who should give the answer, is that we realise there's a service need from the citizens of the country. How does the political leadership identify that service need? So what are the mechanisms they're using to identify that service need? And once that service need is identified, there are many needs. How do you then prioritize in terms of what you commit to in order to close that gap? So let me start off with the parliamentarian first in terms of identifying the service need, because a lot of those service needs may be driven by the leadership when they articulate their future vision. And in the past, our future vision was to turn cities into the Paris of the East. So that was a vision. But does that make sense? Is that what the public wants and the leader?
Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank ACCA for approaching this very important topic. As they say, that a vision without a strategy is a nightmare. Excellent plans without excellent people.
So, there's a catch-22 situation where I was going through the report that you have just mentioned, and very clearly it mentioned three problems in infrastructure development. Number one, political leadership. Number two, funding and finance. And number three, delivery governance. Now, in my mind, as a government, and I'm representing the government right now, we came into being with a very heavy, fast emphasis on infrastructure development projects. And they're all needed. We all need infrastructure. Why do we need it? Because imagine that we are growing at the fastest rate, one of the fastest rates in the world. We are 22 crore people at the moment, and by this, we are sixth largest population in the world. And at this growth rate, it's a population time bomb, it's a pressure on infrastructure, on utilities, on the whole system. So we need to see the catch-22 situation because we don't have resources, we have a financial constraint, we have to think and then invest into areas where we will get the maximum return. So as a government, we laid out a 100-day plan, which is debated all over that, you were supposed to do everything in 100 days. No. We were supposed to lay down our priorities, direction, and agenda in 100 days, and that we have done. Now, the first part of the government is prioritization. We have a vision. We have a vision that we want to make Pakistan an example in the region. So with that, what are the screaming needs? Not just needs, screaming needs. So screaming needs are the basic infrastructure. We don't have clean water, we don't have enough electricity, we don't have enough gas, and we have to do something about it, right? So we start looking at the projects, and we get a data, again, which is insufficient, and which is many times misleading. So we've got to sift the data. First of all, the research. If we make informed decisions, only then we will lead to better decisions. So we look at the energy infrastructure and we see, okay, 30,000 megawatts in Pakistan, right? And we have a need of 24,000. So we have 6,000 extra. Misleading. Because what we have done is that we've invested in production of energy. True. But there's no point in having a product which is lying in the warehouse and not having the buses and the distribution to make it reach to the customers. So the distribution network can only accommodate 19,000 megawatts. And if overloaded, there'll be tripping and breakdowns. So again, as a government, we need to find out what are we going to do. Then the prices of energy. The citizens are screaming that we are increasing the prices. Well, those 30,000 megawatts, 60% of them are based on the most expensive and environmentally dangerous plants, oil. Our oil import business is, our oil imports takes away most of our dollars, right? So why didn't we invest in renewable energy? Why didn't we have renewable energy projects? That's what we are doing at the moment. There were 3,000 megawatts renewable energy projects in the previous government. They were shelved. Now we are trying to renew them and revive them, but they will take time. So for us, number one challenge was the data, which was misleading, and now trying to bring in honest data out of it. Number two, privatization. We have climate change, we have environmental disasters. Do we want plants which will reinforce that? Carbon emissions? No. The quick fix was to get the LNG-based plants. Import LNG, give energy to the people, people will be happy. You'll get votes. But in the long run, it will be expensive, it will be, climatic changes will be more difficult. So we are making very tough decisions at the moment. And we are being criticized right, left, and center. And we are in a population which is, let's say, 70%, or even the educated people don't understand these mechanics. And even within our own party, there are people who are saying, look, who cares after 5 years? We invested in trees in KP, and we have the same problem. Why are you investing in trees? Why are you investing in roads? Because roads are visible. Trees are not going to be visible for 10 years. So within our party, within our own cabinet, and then going into the parliament, we have question marks to answer. But these are hard decisions, unpopular decisions. So, as a government, our first duty is to have a vision, stick to it, and make unpopular decisions for it. And then stick to it against all the media uproar, all the opposition uproar, all the assembly uproar. So one is prioritization and resetting the direction. That's the tough part. The other, which Arif, is funding. Innovative methods of funding. We are a debt-ridden country. We need to have public-private partnerships. And we are looking at that. In the infrastructure, one of our priorities is poverty negation, low-cost housing, and we will use that. So we will be going by it, and hopefully the public-private partnerships. In the next 3 years, you will see housing projects, which will generate 40 industries. But nothing is short term. Everything is going to be visible after 3 years. Meantime, we take the thrashing. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Anjali. And we'll give you a little rest there. We'll turn to companies from World Bank and John Goodman. So we've heard about, the political vision. We've heard also from underneath about, the challenges as well. Talked a little about sustainability as well in her opening statement. Now, the World Bank is a provider of finance. So you're putting in funding for long-term assets, these infrastructure assets. My question to you is, regardless of the financial payback, because it's a sovereign loan you're giving, so there's guarantees that there is financial payback. But a lot of what Anjali said is about the non-financial returns, which are beyond the horizon. Is the World Bank, does the World Bank continue to engage with governments in post-payback measurements of how these projects are performing, or do you discount those right at the start? So, you funded a major, say, road. The road is built, you receive your payback, but the road beyond payback is it providing economic returns? Is it providing economic integration for the local people, etc.? Does the World Bank discount those at the start, or do you remain engaged?
Well, thank you very much for the question. First, let me thank ACCA for the opportunity to be able to participate in this panel along with other distinguished panelists. So for the World Bank, like other multilateral financing institutions, when we approach any project financing within infrastructure or in non-infrastructure sectors, for us, the economic rate of return, beyond the financial rate of return that matters. And we look at a whole range of factors before we commit financing. It's the project's viability, it's the project's environmental and social sustainability, it is the public acceptance of the project, and more importantly, ensuring gender equality. All these come towards ensuring that the project meets the basic economic rate of return. Only after that we do commit financing. And during project implementation and operation, we do continue to monitor this. And we put in place robust monitoring and evaluation framework, beginning with a baseline. Often that is where challenges begin for us as well as many governments to measure progress. We do find data systems weaknesses in countries, so we may often not have robust baselines, but nevertheless, for the few indicators of output and outcome where we have measurement available, we do track progress on a semi-annual, annual basis, and that tells us whether the project financing is going to meet its objectives. So this is how we do approach. I can give you some concrete examples. Very recently, last year, we approved the sort of a 4-lane motorway from Peshawar to Kurkuk. This is to promote transit trade for Afghanistan and Central Asia. Now, when we looked at it as a road, yes, it's fine. You can have the movement of traffic. It helps people to connect with one another. But more importantly, it seemed to us also like a road to nowhere. It will not provide economic opportunities for people in the immediate catchment of the road. So what we did was we took a transport corridor and turned it into an economic corridor. So the road itself would be brick and mortar. It can be done with partnership with the private sector, either through a PPP or subsequently on a management contract basis with tolling. But more importantly, this 48 kilometers will have catchment on both sides, and this passes through some of the more challenging parts. This is the Khyber district, and this is all part of the previous, FATA. And obviously, one knows about all the unrest that goes there. So, what kind of economic opportunities can be created? Whether it's in agribusiness, small and medium enterprises, trade logistics, if this grows into becoming part of the Pakistan-Afghanistan trade. So for us, that was, as a combined package, that was far more attractive than just building a road. The second example is in Karachi, where earlier studies we did indicate that the infrastructure gap is $10 billion. That's for water, mass transit, garbage, overall urban management and service infrastructure. Now that cannot be entirely met by the public finances of the federal government, the provincial government, and it's also beyond the funding capability of the World Bank alone. We need to bring others. This is where we are sort of currently employing what we call internally at the World Bank called MFT, or maximizing finance for development, to see how we can crowd in more private sector. Obviously, in Karachi, it's a big city. When I say big city, it's that it's got capital in it. The question is, Pakistan doesn't have a robust capital market. So how do you come up with ring-fence projects that in the public-private sense, as well as in the capital market sense, we can crowd in commercial financing? And the first question the financing entities and the private sector ask us is, who's going to be responsible for investment? So if we have good regulation, if we have good payback, yes. If not, if it's not credible, if it is not reliable, then an institution like the World Bank, the multilateral can come in and provide deals. That provides the investment confidence guarantee to private sector to come and participate. So in sum, we look at economic returns, we look at the broader contours of any project, we look at the environment, social sustainability of investments, we look to crowd in commercial financing, and ideally for every public sector dollar, if we can bring in 10 times more as private financing, that I think is the best way to close the infrastructure financing gap in Pakistan and other countries.
Very quickly, Dhawan, is there any good example of where, because ultimately your aim is poverty alleviation, the bank saying, are there any good examples in Pakistan where the World Bank's invested money and the economic returns and the social returns have been quite tangible and measurable? Are there any examples?
You're talking about infrastructure?
Yes.
And obviously, our financing of Terbela, Mangla, and the expansion of Terbela, that's provided the backbone of electricity security and stability in the country, and that has produced numerous economic returns to the country. So that's one great example that dates back to the 70s from when the World Bank first participated.
So that's a good segue into NEPRA. So now, talk about the Terbela Dam as providing that sort of anchor for future growth and economic growth. Now, NEPRA provides the regulatory framework. It also has a vision of encouraging, private sector, public-private partnerships. Now, one of the items that Ian mentioned was about encouraging public-private partnerships, ensuring that we don't fall into the pitfalls, and ensuring that we have the data from the past, that we don't repeat the same mistakes. Now, my question to you, what are the features of a successful public-private partnership model? And considering Pakistan's context, what would you suggest be considered for PPP in the power sector?
Thank you very much, Alisa. The basic, structure of very good, public-private partnership model has got three ingredients. Number one, it should reduce the private sector. Number two, it should de-risk the public sector, the government. It should improve the efficiency and, service delivery to the public at large. Having said that, any PPP or P3 model does not work in isolation. The macroeconomic and sectoral factors do impact any P3 model. Again, if we talk about specifically Pakistan, coming to the second part of your question, we talk about the Pakistani context. Right now, we don't have enough fiscal space. So any P3 project would have to ensure that there is limited budgetary commitment on the side of government. And at the same time, we have to improve the service delivery because this is a political mandate as well to improve the efficiency and service delivery for the public. From the private sector, if they are mobilizing the FDI, Pakistan is in desperate need of FDI. So if they are mobilizing the fund, they would be expecting a rational return. What our colleague from World Bank was mentioning, that they also look toward what return is being offered to them, even being a multilateral agency. So being a regulator at NAPRA, we have to ensure that, we give them a very rational tariff. At the same time, if it's a P3, this public-private partnership model, we have to allow them some incentive retention as well. Very precisely, I can give you a global example which can be replicated and adopted with certain amendments in Pakistan. That is how the global transmission business has been expanded. What they did is that the government took the responsibility of land acquisition or right-of-way acquisition for high voltage transmission line, and the private sector was asked for timely completion of project and reduce transmission losses. As a result of this design, there was risk sharing between the investor and the government, and a national tariff was given to the private sector. And the incentive was given that if they are going to have losses less than the regulatory allowed losses, the efficiency gain would be kept by the private sector. So this is how a P3 model works, and this is what the government has to ensure. They don't have much fiscal space, and they should avoid, at the maximum, they should avoid budgetary commitment under any P3 model, and we can take a lead from global such examples.
Just a very quick follow-up on that. If the private sector is encouraged to step in to provide such what used to be in the past monopolistic services, but if they've taken that bold step to come in, provide the funding, get a return based upon the tariff you agreed with them, why is it that the IPPs, because when I asked you this question earlier on over the phone conversation, in my mind an IPP was a public-private partnership, but those IPPs are also very quickly labeled, the private part, labeled as rent seekers, exploiting, the public with high prices and, poor services. So how do we overcome this? A, we want to encourage them to come in, but we very quickly label them as rent seekers. Is there anything wrong in seeking rent?
Three aspects. First is the policies. They came under a power policy. Three aspects. The first and foremost is the policy perspective. They came under a policy which was given by the government. Number two, how it was part of the plan. As Madam was just mentioning about that, how to plan it. And NAPRA, we keep on telling the government authorities that failing to plan is planning to fail. So if you are having, overcapacity or if you are under capacity, these are the issues. And the third aspect, which was covered in earlier session by the speaker, was that you have to be very careful how you proceed with the tariff and, all these rational procedures. In this aspect, when the policy was there, they came under 1994 policy. It was an upfront tariff. It was predetermined. It was technologically neutral. It never mentioned that you have to be under renewable, under hydropower, or any system. So any investor could select any site and select any technology. Here, the planning and policy mismatch was there. So this impacted number one. Number two, when the tariff procedure was being carried out, it was already built in a policy. A tariff at that time, NAPRA did not exist, so I won't say to that extent. But at that time, the tariff was already built in a sort of an upfront tariff. And again, it was not technology specific. An investor, when you had energy shortage, they mobilize their fund, they are there for profit, and if they were able to generate the savings, then it was their right. Subsequently, you entered into public-private, the PPA, power purchase agreement, and there was no such clause. Anyhow, over the years, the sector has learned, the private sector has learned, and we have to rationalize what would be a right profit, and we have to keep in consideration that we need FPI, so we have to incentivize and as well as keep the benefit of the investors and the public at large.
Thank you, Sunil. Now we've got about 10 minutes left. I'll very quickly turn to my colleague Zarif. Now, Zarif, you heard in Dr. Ishwar's remarks the importance that professional finance people can play within governance. In the private sector, the finance function is quite highly elevated in a leadership model. So the CFO is part of the C-suite in the private sector. What can professional accountancy bodies like ACCA do in order to ensure that professional accountants play a far better role in terms of the technocratic input that we can provide into this process? what can ACCA do to sort of support, you know, the things like what Annalise talked about, what the World Bank country head talked about? What can we do in order to support that policy making and then the PFM cycles of infrastructure?
Right, thank you. I think the non-existence of a center of excellence is a major barrier in addition to other barriers which the respected panelists identify, whether that is political, whether that is skills or corruption or lack of competition. And what I have identified a few points here with me, like as a quick win, is to consider the recommendations of the research that ACCA has conducted, and that is based on sharing experience and insights on the knowledge to optimize infrastructure gaps. As you witnessed what Helen also mentioned in her speech, that there are around 20,000 members and 47,000 plus ACCA students that who have been working in different areas in the public sector in Pakistan, Australia, UK, South Africa, and other South Asian countries. Now, specifically, if we look at ACCA, how it can support the concept of establishing the center of excellence and to support the PPPs, is in two ways. One, offering the qualification, so which is relevant to the public sector, and I think that's what more details will be coming during the summit today by our different colleagues. And secondly, is through the experience and knowledge sharing of the professional insight and research that has been happening. In a quick suggestion that I would have is to look into the all global research and surveys that ACCA has conducted, which in most of them Pakistan has had always an active role, and that can be basically analyzed in two ways. One, to look at Pakistan's cities globally. There is a requirement need to be done a comparison within the region or globally, or ACCA could support with this specific data provision so that can inside Pakistan be analyzed and can be looked at what are the thoughts about the public sector. The other important bridge is the education part of it, and that needs to be established in a way so that it upskills the knowledge of the public sector employees working in finance and accounts in the public sector. And that is one of the commitments that ACCA has had from the past, and that has been happening and will go onwards, and that will help the government of Pakistan to moving from the cash accounting to approval and then ultimately to access and IFRS adoption and implementation as Australia and Canada and other major countries. And of course, the role that accountants play and that would mitigate a lot of challenges in terms of implementing the projects, which specifically relates to time, is regarding the costing, budgeting, monitoring of the project life cycle, and also reporting and the internal audit part of it.
Thank you. I know the has to leave at 12. Now, the question for me is, I've adapted these questions as the discussion's gone along. And one of the conversations I was having with Sabina, who's the Additional Finance Secretary from KP, was about change management. Now, in your past life, you've been a trainer, leadership trainer. Now, it seems to me that a lot of the gaps is around addressing the change management that comes around, these infrastructure projects. So many stakeholders haven't been engaged. We don't know what their needs are. We don't know how the projects are impacting them. So what is the political leadership doing in order to address the change, the significant change management piece that affects these projects?
I think this is the most important question, because we as a government have come on this whole mantra of change. And I think changing projects is easy, changing policies is easy, changing programs is easy, changing mindsets is very difficult. And that's what's needed. within the government and outside it as well. I think our biggest challenge is that while we are trying to professionalize and all this August panel has very rightly pointed out all the right things. And you will see that there's a huge political will to make Pakistan's government a professional, systematic, institutionalized government where people come and go and it still keeps on functioning. And the second part, which is very important, that we need to, as a government, we are trying to instill that finance, whether it's public, is taxpayers' money. And this has to be guarded by each one of us. So we are answerable for every single penny that is being spent on every project. And the public has the right to know where we are spending it and how we are spending it. So we, in this country, when we were coming and we were in the opposition, when we used to question that what's happened to this project? Where are the rules? Where is the money gone? There used to be an outrage. So you're talking in a country bringing change where questioning where the money has gone is also outrageous for people who have been used to say that, okay, this is the money. I remember I raised a right to information letter when I was in the opposition, and I said, okay, so this particular leader has 6 of his personal houses as cat boxes. So why is the taxpayer paying money for his personal houses as cat boxes? And I went to buy a shirt from a local shop, and the guard opened up the door, and he said to me, you know, madam, I read that letter, it came in the media, and for the first time I found out that Sarkari Khazana, government treasury, in Urdu it's called Sarkari Khazana, that Sarkari Khazana is not government money, it is my money. So imagine the person on the street did not even know that this finance that we are spending is the finance that comes out from his pocket. So that is our major problem, that the change management, making people aware of the rights, making government officials aware, making the bureaucracy aware, making projects manager aware that, okay guys, you need to be professional. And having people like you all who are here from ACCA, from the accounting body, from the engineering body, all these professional organizations, we have an aim of making them part of our deals. But there needs to be change management over there as well. Because when these professional bodies work with us, they have these mindsets of working with the private sector, and they get very frustrated by working with the government. And they start complaining about it. But we say, okay, fine, 70 years, there's been a mindset over here, and if you go to a finance secretary and you give him a project and he just puts it on the side, that's because he's been used to it for 70 years. So even I would advise that in your professional bodies, when you keep that CPA degree, teach them how to sell their projects and their services to the public sector. Because they are so used to selling it to the private sector that they go over there, they have these wonderful PowerPoints which sell immediately to an Engro or to a Nestle or to a Coke. And when they sell it to a finance secretary or a finance minister or a revenue head, they look at it in a board manner and say, okay, I'll give you the next meeting after a month. And they all come back saying, this government is also the same. So we need to have a complete change management approach at all ends. Multilaterals are very good at that because they deal with governments. So World Bank knows how to deal with governments. And they keep at it. I think the professional bodies also need to understand that. And we as a government need to understand that professionals have a very limited span of tolerance with us. So we need to be a little proficient at that as well. But there are many examples. And I will tell you the example of the William tsunami in KP. It took about 1.5 years for the multilateral agencies, and I think they were the quickest. They could understand the sustainability part. The government, the bureaucracy, the schools, the colleges, and the general public to understand that a tree is as important as a megawatt of, electricity, in fact, more important. And it took about 2.5 years. Once that understanding took place, everybody pulled in, and now it's the World Economic Forum has just made a video on it, says that this is what Pakistan is doing in making the earth and the world more greener. What are other countries doing? So that project has become the best practice project, which is now being shown as an example of public, private, multilateral, and professional bodies example. And my last word would be that change is always painful, and unfortunately, it takes time. But I would invite all of you to work with us, teach us, learn from us, and I think that in the end, our mutual objective of making Pakistan's projects, programs, policies, finances more transparent, more service-oriented, more professional will change. Thank you.
Thank you so much. With the panel's permission, I'll just open up a couple of questions for about 5 minutes, and we'll take about three or four questions. So I think there are mics around the audience. So if you want to ask a question, please put your hand up and get the mic to you. Kindly introduce yourself, kindly make the question sort of concise and to the point. Any questions out there? If you don't ask a question, I'll ask one. Yes, the gentleman there on the left. You introduce yourself and ask your question, please.
My name is Sohail Kiani. I'm an ex-vice president of Merrill Lynch in Singapore. I run my own asset management company here and manage people's money. A lot of the CEOs and high net worth individuals which I deal with who would like to invest in Pakistan ask a few questions repeatedly, and I might have some of the answers, but I'd like to throw it out to you so you can give me the feedback. One is the public-private partnerships, which are very prevalent, especially in the Asia Pacific, are sorely lacking here. I would like to know from this panelist why, number one, and what can be done to catalyze it, what can be done to make it stick. That's the first question. The second question is, if we were to set up a fund, let's say in Pakistan for an infrastructure fund, mostly it's done offshore because there's a lot of benefits and this and that. One of the things which I have seen in Canada and some of the developed countries is flow-through credits. I have never seen that in Pakistan. So for example, mining and oil and gas, which is direly needed here. Let's say in Canada, if I as an individual gave 1 lakh rupees to a fund, and I would get a tax receipt through a flow-through tax credit, so the money goes into the ground rather than to the government. So I have to give the money anyway, but the government should make a deal in some, or the ACCA advises them how to emulate that. Could you comment on that, please?
Okay, so let me ask Mr. Irangovan to comment on that first. I think it's an interesting question, but as a finance, as a banker, you would like to answer that.
I think the first one is on what, if I get your question correctly, what constrains public-private partnership in Pakistan? My colleague from NAPRA was talking about in the IPP sector, there are many public-private partnerships. Obviously, there are opportunities as well as challenges. If I sort of broadly draw on global experience as to why Pakistan is unable to attract, one is the investment climate. The private sector looks to regulatory predictability, because at the end of the day, without that, you're not sure of your investments, how secure they are. And there have been a couple of bad experiences that are out there globally, which Pakistan is now trying to resolve. So that's the important one, regulatory predictability. Second is depth of your financial markets. And here, capital markets in Pakistan is still in infancy. It doesn't really be able to bring in long-term money. I think the best you can get is 7 to 10 year money here. If you're looking at infrastructure, you need something like in the horizon of 15 to 20 year money to make both the economic and the financial returns more attractive. And third would be the implementation capabilities that often we find, not only in Pakistan, throughout South Asia, projects don't get completed on time, and often you have huge cost overruns. And that has been one binding constraints that you see in public-private partnerships. So if the governments can model a better private-public infrastructure development, that itself would be sort of a great attraction to drawing private sector.
Any more questions?
I'd just like to just add to what he said, because there were, I can't answer the technical questions because I'm not a technical person, but he's absolutely right that the ease of doing business in Pakistan is an indicator. The World Economic Forum has published for so many countries. We are on 136 out of 180 countries. And that's the biggest challenge that we have. Our Board of Investment is now working specifically and has put up targets that we need to come below 100 in a certain amount of time, which means the top two problems that people have mentioned in Pakistan. One is the 47 permissions that they have to take to various government departments. So one window operation should be there. And of course, the tax regime and the corruption and all those factors as well. So that's one of the issues that we have. Second, somehow, after the 70s, when nationalization took place, the hangover of government policies being anti-private sector remained and still remains over there. And that's what our government is trying to say, that we want private sector, we want businesses to flourish, and we are trying to fight that legacy that we are carrying, that government interferes and then takes over, the private sector stays away. So these are two factors we are working on, and hopefully things will be better.
Let's take another question. Sir, you.
I'm Dr. Mohammed Akhtar from FAST University. My question is from Vijay. Please share the vision of current government regarding education infrastructure development.
Educational infrastructure. Is there a need? Is there a need for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you picked the right thing. Number one priority is education, because education is what they say is the best contraceptive, because the more educated you are, the lesser the population will be. Education is the best counter-terrorism weapon. The more educated you are, the less you will resort to violence. And so it's a top priority for us. Number one priority is that we have three systems operating in Pakistan. One is the private sector, which is less than 1 million students go over there, the public sector, and then the madrasa. So our basic vision is that if we want education to be equal and give equal opportunity to everybody, the education apartheid, whom I call, the public sector, poor students who go over there and they are looked down upon when they go for jobs or whatever, because they can't speak, they can't write, and the madrasas, which are looked down with suspicion. And so we want to integrate that, a national curriculum policy, and so syllabus is being formed to integrate all these things so that everybody has an opportunity of being educated at a low cost, because the only change will come if the public sector education becomes stagnant. With the private sector education becoming good, change will not come. It's only when the public sector catches up with the private sector and you have a mass of students coming out with the quality of education, that policies of environment, policies of health, policies of counterterrorism, policies of looking at transparent public finances, they can be implemented properly. So that's basically our vision over there.
Thank you so much, and I'm just going to wrap up now. because of scarcity of time, and our panelists have to be elsewhere as well. So let me, first of all, just sum up. I think some of the challenges for the accounting profession is that the talent management gap that exists in the public sector needs to be addressed. And when I say talent management, there's a whole lot of things in that. There's recruitment, there's retention, there's reward, all those things for ACCA members to be trusted and then employed within that sector. Talent management needs to be addressed there, because that's the only way you can fill the gap. Apart from that, Ian mentioned artificial intelligence, robotics. That's all very well, but the trust that needs to be established between the so-called technocrats and the parliamentarians, that also needs to be addressed as well. ACCA, on its part, is working with the governments of Balochistan, KP, and FATA with developing an advanced public sector financial management qualification. We're about halfway through that. The design spec is given in your folder, so do have a look at that. And by June 2020, we'll have a full-fledged bespoke qualification ready to support the PFM gaps in the country. And the World Bank is managing the multi-donor trust fund that's sponsoring that project, sir. So I'd like to thank Mr. Elon Govan, the country head of the World Bank. A big round of applause, appreciation. Mr. Marmoni, Executive Director of NEPRA, a senior ACCA member as well. A big round of applause to Mr. Under Abbas, as articulate as ever in delivering the messages from the government. They make perfect sense that we're looking forward to, successful outcomes from the government. We're all interested in that. Thank you, Anjali, for your presence here. My colleague Zarif, who's coming from Dubai and has talked about how the PAOs, the professional accountancy organizations, can support this agenda. Thank you, Zarif, for joining us as well. And thank you to the audience and for your questions. I apologize if I haven't addressed all your questions. Perhaps over lunch you can grab some of the hands as well. Thank you all very much. Faisal,
yes, can I have Sajid and Ian back on stage, please, for presenting the panel with our appreciation. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can we have a token of appreciation for Mr. Langwon? And for Mr. Salman Amin, who's the Executive Director at NEPRA, as well as a very senior ACCA member. And for Dalil Abbas, who's the Parliamentary Secretary for Foreign Affairs. And of course, for my colleague, Mr. Zarif Luton, who is the Head of Market Partnerships at ACCA. And for the moderator, Mr. Arif Mirza, my very respected colleague. And it would be great if we could have a group photograph with Ian, Sajid, Arif, and the rest of the panelists, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. And this now brings us to the section of the summit that I'm particularly very excited about. It gives me immense pleasure to share that ACCA has worked closely with the government of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, government of Balochistan, and government of Quetta to design a brand new qualification in public financial management. ACC has conducted a global research on drivers of change in the public sector, and as you would agree that among many other factors, capacity building of civil servants has been one of the most important drivers that will bring about change and reforms in the public sector. Mr. Safir Ahmed, who is the Additional Secretary Finance at the government of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, has been very closely involved in co-designing the new qualification, and it gives me immense pleasure to request Mr. Safir Ahmed to please step forward to unveil the qualification. Mr. Safir Ahmed.
Thank you, Faisal. First of all, why this qualification? Is all of us know that there are capacity gaps in public financial management when it comes to management resources of the government. The skill set which is required to betterly manage the public finance is very rare, both in federal as well as in provincial governments. That is why there is a dire need of knowledgeable people in the public finance to cope with various financial challenges like control fiscal deficit, raising revenues and savings in expenditure, cutting the current expenditure in order to provide more fiscal space for development projects, and improving overall service delivery. These were the reasons why the government of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, along with the Balochistan government and erstwhile Quetta, feel the need that they should impart state-of-the-art knowledge to their civil servants in public financial management, budgeting, and financial reporting. And all these three governments choose ACCA to develop public financial management professional accreditation program, the PFM. We started this journey almost a year ago, and in the course of this journey, we conducted more than 130 interviews, workshops, stakeholder engagement, and PFM practitioners both in federal level as well as in the provincial level, and also we engaged the Office of Auditor General of Pakistan and Controller General of Accounts. The project consists of two phases. We have completed the phase one, which will mainly include the title, the syllabus, the entry requirements, exemption strategies, the progression rules, the learning strategies, award and exit points. This phase one has already been completed and we have signed off in oversight committee. Now we are in the phase two, and the main deliverable of the phase two are the qualification, learning material, development, assessment, student journey, digitization of content, development of master training, and pilot of qualification. This phase will be completed in June 2020, and we are determined to have a pilot completed before the cutoff date of June 2020. We expect to develop a qualification that is fit for development of PFM manpower across the three governments, but will also have a litmus effect on recruiting new talent and keeping the existing talents in the public sector. Delivery of the qualification is subject to another agreement which is under negotiation. All the participants have been shared with the detailed specification and design of the qualification. This qualification has three levels. The first is certificate, followed by a diploma, and the third is the advanced diploma. And the unique thing about this qualification is the blend of standard modules of ACCA and a bespoke module of PFM practices, which are prevailing in the federal as well as in the provincial government in Pakistan. The ACCA examination builds the core professional and technical competence in budgeting, accounting, and reporting, while the PFM module discusses the best practices in the world, PFM in Pakistan, and foundation for improvement and reforms. Now I will mention some of the areas which this qualification will cover. They include the PFM principles and concepts, PFM cycle, the project management cycle, debt management, planning and budgeting, project management, cash planning and management, international public sector accounting standards, external and internal audit, good governance, anti-corruption, counter-fraud and anti-money laundering initiatives, and public-private partnership. We are looking forward for strong support from the participant to be strong advocate of the PFM qualification. This qualification will coexist with PEPFAR with clearly defined exemptions and recognition policies. We also need certain privileges from the government, that is career progression, qualification-based pay, and recognition of this qualification in government rules and regulations. If there is any comments, suggestion, or criticism about this qualification, we will be more than happy to learn. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Safir sir, can you please stay on stage? Can I request Sajid Aslam and Ian Mansfield to come on stage and present Mr. Safir with a token of our appreciation, please? Thank you very much, Ian, Sajid, and Mr. Safir. ACC contributes to all the economies and societies it operates in through its public value agenda. ACC delivers it through its network of offices and, more importantly, through our valued members, which is a combined strength of over 200,000 individual members across 178 countries. One such member is Mr. Murtaza Hassan, who has recently worked with the Pakistan Tobacco Board on the reform and policy agenda. I would like to request Murtaza to step forward and briefly share the exceptional work that he and his fellow team members have done at the PGB. Mr. Murtaza, please.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Murtaza Hassan, and I'm currently working as General Manager at one of the premier Toyota dealerships in the KP region. I joined Toyota about 3 months back. Before working as General Manager, I was running my own business consultancy firm by the name of Retail Business Consultants in the KP region. While I was working as a business consultant, I was approached by Asad Malik, who works in the ACC Peshawar office, and he shared this idea of working on the strategic level assessment of Pakistan Tobacco Board. Basically, I think if I remember it correctly, it was about 2 years back when we worked on the report. And I had a team of around 6 to 7 members. They were all ACC members. I'm an FCCA myself. The idea was to conduct a strategic and tactical level assessment of Pakistan Tobacco Board. I'll go through the report, but before I do that, I would like to share that the result of the report was fantastic, and it clearly depicts the fact that ACCA members can offer a lot more in terms of public and private sector valuation. So let's go through the report. The 4 areas that we assessed were legal matters / non-implementation of rules, regulations, service-related matters, internal financial management, and ordination. Due to confidentiality, I will not share the details of each point. As you can see on the screen, I'll just quickly go through each and every point. The first issue identified was the definition of tobacco was outdated, and because of that, advantage was taken by some opportunistic stakeholders. The second issue we identified was cess collection was affected due to improper check and balances. Cess is one of the main sources of income for PTB. Then there was an absence of vigilance committee. PTB has its own ordinance 1968. As per that ordinance, this committee mainly checks the grades assigned to various types of tobacco used for the manufacture of cigarettes. The fourth issue we identified was there was another absence of tobacco development committee. This committee mainly keeps accounts of all money received and expended by PTB. The next issue we identified was there was a particular land purchased, but before the purchase could be made, it already had litigation issues. So there was no due diligence process in place to check whether the land was legally cleared or not. Then the audited accounts were not published on a timely basis. The board of directors was not existing. And because of that, there were lots of operational issues that were identified while conducting this strategic and tactical level assessment. There was another committee missing, and then when they formed it, the rule was not properly implemented. The committee was called Price and Grade Revision Committee. Then the other issue we identified was illegal and unregistered buyers at the mandi. They formulated an annual chart of activities, and that was not properly followed by PTB as well. The major issue, which I would think it seriously needs to be addressed at the government level, is they have their own rules and regulations, and whenever they want to make a change, they propose it, and it takes a lot of time for that change to be made. So there was a lack of support from government of Pakistan because amendments in the PTB ordinance 1968 were sent for approval to Ministry of Law and Parliamentary Affairs, and they were not handled on a timely basis. This was 2 years back. Maybe they have done it by now. Let's move on. The second area we addressed was service-related matters. The organogram of PTB was established in 1985, and 2 years back when we conducted the assessment, it was not updated at all. Then, as far as the employees were concerned, there was an ambiguous and complicated career ladder for all the employees that were serving PTB. The third issue identified was there was an additional charge on few of the employees. So they were overburdened. They had to do the main original activities, and they had to do extra activities as well, which clearly impaired their performance. The fourth issue identified was there were no in-writing SOPs, no job descriptions, no manuals, no policies, none whatsoever at all. And KPIs were not taken into account for salary structure determination. Let's move on to the third area, please. As far as internal financial management was concerned, there was no bank reconciliation exercise, there was no petty cash reconciliation exercise, there was no cash book maintained, there was no fixed asset register. So these are all risk areas which need to be looked at. The second issue we identified was there were no accounting policies in place for property, plant and equipment, expenses and liabilities. So they were not properly accounted for as per best practices. Actuarial work was not carried out for valuation of PTB pension fund. This falls under IS 19. The fourth issue we identified was facilitation for farmer payments were not done through bank. They were done through cash. So another high risk area. The fourth area that we touched was automation, which can be useful for both private and public sector. They hired a consultant who helped them develop a financial information system, but that was not properly implemented. And unfortunately, the precious public money was wasted because they paid a lot of money for the system. Then again, they paid a lot of money for another system, management information system, and that was not properly implemented at all. So I would like to thank ACCA fraternity for giving me this opportunity to work on the PTB at strategic and tactical level. I'm lucky by the grace of Almighty Allah that the support was appreciated at the global ACCA level as well. The whole team worked really hard to identify all these issues. Some of these issues, rather, I would say majority of these issues, they pertain to most of the government entities of Pakistan. So, relevant authorities who are sitting here, I would like to request that please take a copy of the report and work on all the public entities that work in Pakistan. Because I personally believe that Pakistan is at a very critical stage, and we should all contribute as much as we can to help Pakistan build a better future prospect for the youngsters like me and the ones that will work for Pakistan. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Can you just stay on the stage, please? And can I have, Murtuza, can you stay on the stage, please? Can I have Sajid and Ian back on the stage one at a time to share a token of appreciation? We will now have our final panel discussion, and I would like to request the next moderator to step on stage. Priya Wajid is a professional accountant who was trained at PricewaterhouseCoopers. She's the ex-program head, accounting and finance, also and looked after the Center of Executive Development at NUST Business School, one of the premium business schools in Pakistan. She was also awarded the Best Teacher Award at NUST, a certified trainer in executive education from Harvard Business School, and one of the 8 national and international authors of ACCA's new Advanced Diploma in Public Sector Financial Management. She's currently a managing partner of a consultancy firm. It gives me immense pleasure to invite Priya Wajid to please step forward and take the stage for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Faisal. Well, interesting times we are living in. Interesting times. When we talk of 21st century public finance function, why do we need to talk about something that has been on a different tangent in 21st century? Let me take you back a little in time, almost a century and a half back. 1876. 1876, a product, telephone, was launched. And it took telephone 75 years to reach the mark of first 50 million customers. This is considered to be one of the benchmarks in determining the product penetration in the market. Down the lane, 2016, the mobile game was launched, Pogo, and Pogo took only 19 days to reach the same mark of 50 million customers. So Century has made this difference, reducing 75 years to 19 days. Another brief example, knowledge. At the time of advent of previous century, 1900s, knowledge was doubling every century. 1940, this every century conversion rate was reduced to knowledge was doubling every 25 years. Year 2014, when this research was undertaken, knowledge at that time was doubling every 3 months, every 13 months, meaning thereby that the quantum of knowledge available to humankind was increasing twofold in 13 months' time. And it is anticipated that within the same century that we are standing today, this time will be further reduced to 12 months. So this is the pace of change and the exponential rate at which things are changing. So when we talk about 21st century, it's no more a cliche. It's a big reality of our times. And when we talk of public finance, I believe, is as old as human civilization. If I think of tribes and clans of prior times, I can't imagine it without a head who would be taking contributions from general public and then investing on some of their needs, be it security or even the identity of living in a community, etc. I give you a very interesting quote from Marcus Cicero, 55 BC. And he said, "The arrogance of officialdom should be tempered and controlled, and assistance from foreign lands must be reduced, lest Rome will fall." Even in this statement of that old times, we can very clearly see two strands of how we see public finance function today. The behavior of bureaucracy, lower dependence on foreign loans. So today we have set up a panel of distinguished participants from both public sector and private sector who are going to take us into the 21st century demands and developments that we foresee happening in this domain of public finance, and what we really need to prepare ourselves, care ourselves for the upcoming times. So first, I will invite Mr. Irshad Ahmed Kaleemi, Deputy Auditor General of Pakistan, for joining. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Then we have Mr. Mia Idris, Controller Military Accounts. Two core institutions that Dr. Rishta Dawar also talked about. Thanks. Then we have Dr. Shahid Mahmood, who is Chairman and Group CEO, Interactive Group. And then Mr. Yusuf Haroon, as you're right, he'll be joining us shortly. He is Principal Deloitte Consulting. So without further ado, thank you so much, first of all, for joining us today. So Mr. Irshad, if we think of key players in public finance in Pakistan, in fact, the thing from which today's presentation also started was the contribution of Supreme Audit institutions. So I would like you to throw some light on public finance from your lens, that how you see public finance function as of today. One. Two, what role AGT is playing? Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity and inviting me here at this August forum. So, and I must thank you for starting the session from 55 BC and starting from Sicily. So, let me say a few words about the public finance, and because the fiscal social has a relationship with society, definitely. And yes, as the operator was saying, that we are on the public finance management schedule with the finance division. That will be laid before the Parliament in due course. In what shape it adopts after the discussion of the Parliament on that in the democratic settlement. So the Office of Renewal, we work under the Constitution of Pakistan. Thank you. And as I was going through this session's sort of private, we are discussing 21st century. But for 21st century is our field for public finance management is okay in synchronization to the provisions of the Constitution of Pakistan for the public, and the Constitution specifies the distributive justice, equitable justice. And here, the role of the Auditing of Pakistan or his department of my role as Secretary starts. The thing is that from where the state of Pakistan or any state, we are talking about Pakistan, gets its resources and budgeted for public spending. Let it be SDGs, let it be the public sector entities, so on and so forth. do we have the accurate estimates? Do we have accurate budgeting processes for that? Yes, you have mentioned legacy. In my department was one of the premier departments of the colonial period. We have a history, my department has a history of continuation since the last 156 years. And being the crown colony, then as an independent country. 40 years almost without constitution. 40 years with the constitution. So from where do we get our resources for the public spending? And what tools do we have? Let me say very with clarity that we have budgetary estimates. And they are the estimates of the collector. Let it be the Federal Bureau of Revenues or any collector. They are not the numbers provided by the revenue generators. So we plan our economic activity for the next fiscal or budgetary year on the basis of estimates and estimates of the collector only. And I don't want to qualify this word estimate. And as you know that the estimates are estimates. When we plan our economic activity, any sector, public, government, public spending, and as I have started my points, that it has a relationship with the society. I don't want to further elaborate. So on the basis of estimates, we plan our activity. So if there is any gap in the estimation, gap of accuracy or gap of numbers, so my whole year activity is compromised. So that's why the state does expenditure budgeting. We don't go for revenue budgeting. As supposedly, just to mention, because education being the prime thing, if Higher Education Commission has a plan for certain, I'm talking with the perspective of auditor and as a state functionary. If Higher Education Commission is planning for their activities in the upcoming fiscal or calendar year, and for what they need this much of money, while my concern is this, that how much of revenue HEC would be generating for itself to plan their expense as a source of revenue, not on the basis of estimation, to get a chunk from the estimations of the estimated budget of expenditure for the next year. So as an auditor of the state, my first point is this, that we have to come out of the legacy of the colonial periods. We have to secure the revenue budgeting, not basing on estimations. And the dilemma is that we base on estimations not of the generators of the revenues, but the estimations basing on the numbers of collectors. Only you are not the generators of revenue. So how realistic could be a spending unit who spends or plans their spending on the basis of estimations of the collectors, not on the basis of the estimations of the generators of the revenue? First. and having relevance to the society. If I plan for any spending, let it be SDGs, any road, any water project, any solar, small projects at the village level. Can I go for 100% implementation of my plan unless I'm not sure of my revenues first? We were discussing the SDG reports yesterday morning of one province, and this was the issue. Believe you that this project we couldn't complete because non-provision of the amounts specified for the purpose. And since the amounts have a timeline of the close of the year, financial or fiscal year, so the project gets in doldrums. Second, as an auditor, my wing of commercial audit, though we have segmented, I'll take few seconds that we have reorganized the audit strategy. Now we have gone for thematic areas. We have a Directorate General for Energy Audit. We have a Directorate General for Water. We are not going now ministry-wise, but the area-wise, energy, corporate social responsibility, so on and so forth. So here comes the public sector entities. Let it be any, the smallest unknown or the most talked about entities, the public sector. Do they plan their expense to flourish and to grow and to stabilize on the basis of their revenue generations? As an auditor, let me say it, on the basis of estimations, not on the basis of their revenues. So whatsoever we hear about public sector entities, whatsoever good words we hear about them, so this is one of the basic reasons for that. And we are entering in 21st century with this style of planning our expense for the society, for the public sector entities, and what governance and delivery to the public would be in what field. No comment. So, am I talking enough for? So, since my office is the watchdog on the spending of public money, so these are my concerns. And as a common man of the society, this is also my concern that a scheme for me is to be implemented during the specified time with the best use of the public money allocated or provided for the purpose for its best capitalization. So big question, I think, would the state be running like this on the basis of estimations or on the basis of realistic numbers as this much revenue I'll be having for this project during this period? So the issue was entering 21st century. Would we be entering like this? Okay, my batchmates, my senior and junior colleagues, and we keep on changing the heads, getting posted somewhere. I served many years, in Secretariat, Ministry of Petroleum and like that. So having a taste of the level of both the sides, being audited and getting audited as well. So I'm not a realistic man regarding what I'll be spending because I'm not realistic what I'll be having. As an auditor, this is my first issue. Because when I go for audit, Why it was not completed in the due course as specified in the PC1 article? So we were short of money. Why? This was allocated but was not provided. And this is my 35th year of service as an auditor, 6 years. So I'm seeing this since the last so many years. We are not able to complete the projects. And we are not able to complete the projects. Service delivery to public, which we are supposed to. That's compromised. This is.
Thank you so much, sir. I really appreciate your input on the issue, and I fully agree that yes, the entire system is too assumption based. Unless we add more pragmatism and sagacity to the estimation process itself, and add some more commercial acumen to the entire public sector function, it's hard to progress ahead. Well, this brings me to the next question to Mr. Idris, that Mr. Shah Morning also said that there are massive public sector reforms that are under consideration of the present government, and they were lovely to listen to amazing things that are in progress. But one thing that I felt at that time was that the entire public sector processes are very process driven, like tick marks to certain processes. And as such, the sir just mentioned that even in improving those processes, we haven't yet come to a level where we would have expedited the processes or achieved a good level of efficiency in those processes. So how do you see that? Wouldn't it need a massive mindset paradigm shift to achieve those reforms? What is the current state with the office that you hold, and how do you see that evolving? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dilimi rightly pointed out, and you have touched on that. Actually, you're right. We need to focus on these areas that you have pointed out. Actually, I'll take it from your example that now the pace is changing. The world is changing. So is public finance. So people are expecting more. We need to create more value out of the money that we are spending. So we have to take quality out of the less spending. So this is what we are focusing on, being in the public sector. So being a control and military accounts, we are a separate accounting entity, and we are dealing with like pay and pensions and all the defense expenditures and receipts and other stuff, and then we exchange accounts and all that adjustment. Now, I just give you a few examples. We actually, what you're saying that we need to go through the processes and we need to, check all the boxes. Actually, the things are a bit complicated. We still are living with some rules and regulations that are like 100 years old. But I should rather confess that. And we need to change certain few things that we need to introduce. So one thing is the public sector reform. I agree we need to reform, and we need to introduce certain changes by focusing on the final outcome, the target what we actually want to achieve. Now the people are expecting more. The people are expecting more quality in the service delivery, quick and efficient sort of service delivery. So all the money that goes in should yield these results. I think the most important thing is we need to now take major steps towards IT interventions, rather I would say technical interventions in the whole system. For that, I should point out for that we need actually the reforms as well, because we need to redesign the processes and re-engineer the whole processes. Once we used to, just an example, for instance, we are dealing with more than 1.2 million pensioners, and they are living throughout Pakistan and far-flung areas, and from all the ranks of defense services. So now the things are changing. they have to, till today, most of them, they have to take their pension book and go to the nearest post office and have to wait, and there's no accounting system in that office, and he just pulls in some money and hands it over to the pensioner. Now, the things in the corporate sector, overall in the social setup, you can see that things have been changed. Now we can use other technologies for sending money so quickly. But here, why we cannot shift to that? We need reforms. We need certain legislations. We need to have certain accounting procedures so that we have to go through. But we have to do that because we cannot keep pace with the people's expectation, with the way the globalization is ahead. I mean, public finance is one of the most important things that is now emerging in this century. So public finance, it has everything to do with the public. So as I already just said that now the public is asking more. They are asking more transparency, accountability. They need to know where the money is going, what we are getting out of the money. We are paying taxes, and what we are getting out of that amounts. So based on that, certainly I agree that we need to focus on the reforms. We need to adopt technological interventions. We need to go for the IT and technology-driven solutions for the problem we are facing. We need to, again, legislate. We need to prioritize the budget, and we need to prioritize the spending. And it should be very transparent, very clear. So,
thank you so much for your contribution, sir. And I really agree that, yes, regulatory change is of paramount importance. Unless that is done hand in hand with the reforms at policy level, they are not going to actually trigger down into the system and bring the changes. Well, you highlighted the contribution of technology in the finance function, particularly the public finance function, and this makes you all the more relevant into the discussion, Dr. Shahid, that how do you see from the tech standpoint where we are and what should we do to hit the ground running in coming times?
Thank you, and it's indeed a pleasure. When I was asked to come to a public finance session, I was like, okay, what do I do as a tech in public finance? But let me share with you from where you started. You went back into the BC, and let me take you to 2100. So the future is all about technologies, machine learning, AI, synthetic biology. It is about how people are moving to fintech, and basically fintech then moving finance in a manner that a company like Alibaba by 2030 will be the 5th largest economy in the world. We have to keep these things very focused. If as Pakistan we are to progress, then the rules and regulation and the institutional change that Dr. Ishrat was talking about, what Sir from the German office spoke about. I sat on the board of the bank, and the first time I saw the accounts, and they said it's notional accounts. And I just couldn't get it. What is notional accounts? They said it takes us this long to get the reconciliation of all our accounts from all our branches. And to say that to a tech guy is like criminal. So I understand that if you work on estimations, but here is the second challenge, and I'm glad that I'm sitting with two very important people from the public sector. The other challenge is that we are adding 4 million people every year. In the lifespan of the people that we will be adding, we will have much more constraint in how finance moves. Therefore, the job infrastructure in the country will move to e-platforms and fintech. This is where I will just throw one example for people to understand what are we talking about and what pace. And this is where I think the ACCA can come in as a great propellant and catalyst in getting our public sector and other sectors, public-private partnership also to focus on. Alibaba every year has what they call the Singles Day sale. That's on the 11th of November. This year, Jack Ma was not happy with his team because since the day Alibaba got on ground, this was the first time their year-on-year growth was 25% and not 42%. But what did they do in one day? On this Singles Day sale, they had a sale figure of $30.8 billion US. So I was fortunate to be sitting with some of the senior members of Alibaba, and I said, I can comprehend the 30.8 billion with all the imagination I can have. But you have to translate this to me in financial transactions. They looked at their numbers because everything is documented, and they said we are averaging 300,000 financial transactions per second. 300,000 financial transactions per second. Now, you take that further, and I said, and what is your logistic delivery mechanism to close the 30.8 billion? Their first delivery was done in 53 minutes from the placement of the order. This is the magnitude at which things will flow. And we being one of their partners in the CPEC, if we do not develop this efficiency level within us, we are seriously going to be hampered with all the debt that we are gathering, because this is the pace at which they want to move. So forget about estimated. We have to go into anticipatory governance, and we have to transform in how do we keep abreast with them. We are fortunate, and maybe very fortunate, by sheer geographical positioning of ourselves. We are neighbors to the two most progressive nations of the world, one being China and the other being India. But let me add here, I was at a conference where I was asked this question about skills development and vocational training, because that's the future. And that's where public finance has to start looking at, that people will move with what skill sets they have instead of what jobs they have, because jobs and the current education system will have to move to keep abreast with the kind of people we will have to cater for at the job market. And it was shocking for me to realize that a Chinese kid, from his day of entry into the schooling system for the first 12 years, spends approximately 2,100 hours per year, in comparison to a Pakistani kid who's spending 1,076 hours. In a nutshell, this means that a Pakistani kid, when he does his 12 years of schooling, and whatever schooling you can give him, 64% being in the public sector, compared to a Chinese kid, is 12 years and the Chinese kid is 24 years. It's not only the educational skill set that he's developed, it is the work ethics that he's developed, and it is at the pace at which they are working to be surviving in the global economy. We add 1 billion people every 12 years to the earth, and Earth's resources have to be managed in that fashion. So technology incorporation and the acumen within the public sector, especially the finance spend, will have to happen at that capitalistic pace. Because if it doesn't happen, and this is where ACCA can come into play, if it doesn't happen, there will be a serious disarray and belief systems between whoever is elected and whoever the public is.
Thank you, sir. As Sanjay was so insightful into the present day situation versus the rest of the world, it was actually scary, honestly speaking, that unless we skill ourselves at the same level we're heading towards. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Yusuf, and we are apologetic that we started without you on board, but we had to because of time constraints. So, Mr. Yusuf, you have spent a lot of time working in the real estate sector. So, in that sector specifically, you come across public-private interactions with a lot more levels as compared to any other sector. How would you comment on that interaction, or that partnership, or that conversation undertaken between private and public sector? If there are any gaps, what suggestions would you make to bridge them?
Thank you. It's a very valid question.
very valid question. When I look at public-private sector, especially as our Prime Minister has put up a goal of around 5 million houses, I want to quickly build up my argument by first of all looking at the mindset of the public sector versus the mindset of the private sector. There is a stark difference. First of all, when we talk about public sector, the primary objective is basically welfare of the people, whereas the private sector, the primary objective is of course profitability, wealth maximization. So these are conflicting priorities. But I would like to share one example where, in the telecom sector, this has been synergized. Because if we ask the government, what is your core area of strength? That is primarily to build trust and to build protection, whether it is for investors, whether it is for citizens, whether it is for businesses, or whether it is related to technology. When we look at in terms of private sector, they have the balance sheet, they have the speed of execution, and they can really, achieve the objectives very fast. So let's start looking at the telecom sector, where we do the reformation, where the core competence of the government in terms of policy maker, a ministry was created. In terms of regulator, a regulator was created. And the field, which was actually the public service at one time, the telecom service, provided by the public sector, the whole budget was allocated to that, and there was a burden of this service provision on the public kitty. It was actually rolled out and spinned off to the telecom sector. And the whole investment came in. And we were able to achieve the tele-Linsky very fast, around 14 million connections. Similarly, recently the Competition Commission has talked about, where government has to come back and they have to look at creating a real estate regulator, which means focusing on the policy making, focusing on protection of investor, and then leaving the service fee, which is basically the transaction side, to the private sector in order to, achieve that, deficit in terms of housing. And if we look at it, for example, again, in terms of achieving that trust, when we talk about technology, we've seen that a lot of banks have achieved the technology, and we saw there was a Cybercrime Act, and there was a lot of coverage in the media as well, and the regulator, the state bank, came up, reinforced the trust back into the banking industry. We came up with another innovative, cyber security insurance related things. So similarly, which means that if you look at it, we are at the moment talking about how the public sector and the public finance can, can we adopt innovative model in order to ensure that we are able to achieve the objectives of public welfare fast, which means provision of jobs, which means provision of shelter, which means provision of a lot of services which people feel the public sector lacks, which means in terms of technology provides us the capacity. If we talk about Alibaba, this is the transaction side, but at the moment, as we speak, we have the infrastructure. Look at, the numbers of ATMs and mobile banking that is being used online. It's around, if Alibaba is using 300,000, most probably, or more than that, we are able to use in terms of, one link banking, or, the whole capacity of the telecom network. So that is there. Again, if we look at the Nagara, for example, it's all digitized. The CNIC is there. If you look at the banking sector, we are also seeing that there is a change in terms of how the industry and the definitions of the industry in terms of telecom versus banking. That's a little blurring now because a lot of telecom companies have entered and started mobile services. So as a regulator, while you have created through licensing regime, the difference of in terms of various industries, the line is blurring. So the whole value chain in terms of, the citizen to the public service delivery, that needs to be relooked. And I believe, a lot of innovation in terms of technology is happening there. But again, when we talk about new technologies such as blockchain, this is one example which again enforces trust, on Singapore government, the UAE government have already, and even the Pakistani government have actually committed to adopt those technologies. But again, the key is in terms of how the government is going to ensure that trust. So in terms of conflicting priority, trust versus breach of trust, that needs to be managed. So I believe as long as we are able to achieve that reform, we are able to open up more sectors, including the real estate sector, by reinforcing the commitment of the government into the policy making, into the regulatory side, and leaving the side, the transactory side, industry side for private sector participation. What is going to happen? If I go back to the telecom sector, for example, as you give away the telecom service for the profitability incentive, they're creating a vacuum. That vacuum was, okay, fine, what is going to happen where it is going to make no sense for profitability? So out of that, the revenues within the telecom sector, we created the universal service fund, which means that model can be adopted into the real estate sector as well. That wherever we have citizens which may not have the buying capacity, but can be subsidized within the parameters, because at the moment real estate sector is a very profitable sector. Another, from the telecom example, is, we are looking at in terms of, there is, within the ministry was created the R&D fund. The profitability, a certain incentive was taken out in terms of the R&D fund, or kind of a innovative tax, and is now that R&D fund, now known as Ignite, is investing back into a lot of DG skills, innovation, and so on. So similarly, how in terms of innovative practices we are able to create a public-private partnership to direct public sector finance or oversight of public sector, and private sector governance, raising up that public money and, creating that difference in terms of, where we need the most in terms of entrepreneurship, in terms of technology, in terms of universal service. So I believe if we look at it from that perspective, and for example, in Europe, for example, we have to come out of, trying to regulate the whole economy. We need to create more and more sector-specific regulators. That's the key. And that is where, in terms of that reform, we are going to see that, the function of public finance is going to be more robust, because it is now the future of what I believe the 21st century future of public finance is to create public-private partnership and strengthen our competencies, creating trust and the speed of execution. This is what my points are.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yusuf, for highlighting so many positive things going on there in the domain. Since we're running short of time, so I would just have the last round of one question from each of you. That you as individual stakeholders in the ecosystem of public finance, you yourselves, or for that matter, if you want to identify any other actor in the ecosystem, and one actionable item, one thing that you would like to say that, oh yes, this is the first thing that needs to be done to be really upskilled for the upcoming time. Quickly, starting to you, sir. Thank you.
I will not go for one example, but two things. Documenting the economy, digitizing the economy, and the last most browbeaten word of tax days. When we talk of public finance, from where I'm going to get my revenues? This day. So let me repeat it or re-emphasize this. Documenting the economy by reducing the size of the parallel economy and bringing it in the ambit of the public finance through digitalization. and tax. Thank you.
Like Lisa said, I would also, in addition to the things that he has pointed out, probably we need more money, so we need to broaden taxpayers, we need to collect more taxes, to spend more, and for such a huge population, if we need to improve service delivery, so we need to sensibly take our expenses and prioritize those expenses. And what I already said, that we need to actually reform the public sector in few aspects. Like, I mean, it is not possible to retain quality human resource without investing. I mean, we need to increase the salaries. If we don't, they will just, like an example, I have in my own office, have recruited in grade 16, what we say BPS 16, senior auditors who are qualified as ACCA, ICMA, and even some are chartered accountants. So it is not possible to keep them with this salary of 30, 40,000. So if they going, we again go through the same process. We never have the people who can deliver efficiently and who can deliver quality. So this is another challenge. I think we should focus on that. So we need to give certain incentives, maybe like one is the salary or something to retain this human resource so they can deliver better. Second is obviously digitalization. I have my own experience. I went to China for this big data workshop and we had a seminar. So having, and in all our offices, if it's a military government general, auditor general office, AGPR, whatever office it is, we are having a huge data. But we need to now develop data analysis techniques. We need to know that how to get certain things, certain theories out of that, so that we can forecast certain things. Being in the public sector, this is what I'm saying. I should know what will be my response after 6 months, having the budget I have, the expenses that I'm doing all over Pakistan. So we need to focus on this new developing data sciences and AI, as Dr. Shahid said. So AI is the solution for all this big data. I think probably these 2, 3 things. There are many more, but I would like to, because of opportunity.
I'm glad that what the colleagues on the panel have said. If oxygen is O2, then the simple forward-looking posture that we have to have is O3: open data, open access, and open opportunity for public to use that data. If we do not encourage that, we will be actually crippling our future generations. When you have said that, I think the biggest challenge that any political government and the current public sector has is to develop that trust deficit. And in that trust deficit, if you have open data, open access, and openness of everything, you will then have to set up KPIs for all the public spending that you do, and it should be as transparent as that. Once you establish that, then I think tax and sharing of the load will become much easier and collection will become much better. This gap of not being transparent is actually, I think, the trust deficit. And that can only be addressed with technology if you agree and collectively be transparent.
Yeah, my humble suggestion would be in terms of governance of the public sector, that needs to be prioritized. When we look at our monetary policy, for example, the state bank has raised the monetary policy rate to up to around nearly 11%. So in business standard from the private sector, if we have to grow, it's basically the cost of capital and the debt equity. You do any project, whether it's technology, whether it's real estate, whether it's anywhere in any business area. That is the key. Because, just to give you an example, when this
monetary policy rate is very low, around 3%, plus high water. A car may cost you around 5 or 6,000. So we have seen a huge demand that has been created. And once that demand is created, beyond the capacity of overall automobile sector, we've seen a lot of import, and still, the capacity was not fulfilled. So we saw a lot of foreign investment coming into the country, setting up the automobile sector. So number one, once you raise the monetary policy rates, you kill the demand. You kill the demand. So what happens is you kill investment, you kill the customer incentive, the consumer incentive, and the business incentive. That is one key area which we have to manage. And secondly, I believe that we have to rationalize our taxation policy. At the moment, if we look at the best economic, because the whole idea of looking at the public sector is basically to focus on national economic development. And if you look at UAE, if you look at Singapore, tax are very, very lean. They are smart. They're not very heavy taxation. And they are very simple. So I believe technology is coming in. We need to immediately adopt in terms of, looking at terms of transparency and the transparency in the revenue stream, quickly adopting that technology incentive. So, that would really help a lot of people. We need to simplify that as much as possible. And secondly, I believe, we need to focus on, again, in terms of, for example, the fiscal policy as well, such as devaluation. A Microsoft CD, which may have costed 10,000, now costs 16,000 or 14,000. So if you are a technology-driven company and a country, we need to look at it. At the moment, the UNCTAD report says the global GDP comprises of more than 70% services sector. Pakistan has the largest, one of the largest population in terms of youth. So a huge opportunity in terms of skills, in terms of utilizing that youth population. But if we take certain measures such as monetary policy or fiscal policy that creates a lot of cost burden for the business side, that really helps. So that must be rationalized. And especially in terms of technology, it is now time that in terms we should not be looking at the evaluation as an incentive to one particular segment such as textile and goods one. We need, there is a huge opportunity cost of youth that really puts a lot of burden in terms and compromises their ability and capability of contributing to the economy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. This brings us to a very nice conclusion of today's discussion. As Sir highlighted, better and more appropriate economic documentation, and then professionalization of public finance function, implementation of 3 O's, as you mentioned, Dr. Shahid, and better governance overall. Thank you so much, sirs. Better public finance function is actually the backbone of better fiscal management overall, fiscal administration. Unless we have an improved public finance function, we don't expect the core realities, the ultimate service delivery to an ordinary citizen of a country. And as Mr. Shah rightly mentioned, that the entire purpose of this public finance thing is betterment of people, service delivery to them. So thank you so much, sirs. With this, we close this panel discussion. Thanks a lot. Do we have time for questions?
Yes, we do. In fact, we have over 200 participants attending online. I requested them to ask the questions through the chat panel. And in the meantime, if there are questions from the participants, we'd be delighted to take a few questions, please.
Thank you so much. My name is Ejazullah. I'm a CCA member and working in public sector company. There is a lot of discussion about reforms in public sector and digitization, technology. But the mismatch is here, the human resource in public sector company. My question from the people and leaders working in public sector, the human resource and skill level, you are aware that will they be able to handle these reforms of digitization in the future? If not, is there any change of that the human skill in the public sector would be developed in the future? Thank you.
Very right you have pointed out, but gone are the days when we had simple graduates in government offices. I, in my office, have 76 CMS, 7 ACCAs, 7 PhDs, with first system, CMA. I have 2,000 out of 3,200, 2,000 plus lot is highly qualified and certified of such degrees and certificates. So gone are the days. The thing is this, that as Nyasa was mentioning, that I've heard 750 almost people recently, and it was so painful to offer such a highly qualified people just 40,000 rupees. So, we'll groom them, they'll understand the job, then definitely for their personal and career progression, they'll leave my job because I'm giving them hardly 45,000 against such degrees. So, yes, we have a lot of qualified people in government strata nowadays. If you come across, it would be a great job. So, but the salary structure, remunerations are to change.
Thank you, sir. Gee, do we have another question? Yes, sir, can we have it from the people who are viewing us online?
Well, actually, unfortunately, there is no question. We are repeatedly sending reminders. If there's anything in the meantime, I'll ask. But can I request Sajid and Ian to come on stage and present the panel with a token of appreciation, please? Thank you.
Question. Is a question?
Oh, there is a question, sorry.
Assalamualaikum. This is Zahida. I'm Additional Director, Internal Audit and Compliance Department, Securities and Exchange Commission, Pakistan. I have a question, sir. What actually is AGPR is doing to enhance its strong internal audit department? Could you please highlight the points?
Ma'am, I must say that you are very accurate and in time, because this was only the last week when we have notified and revamped our internal audit and internal controls. So we have gone out of the box, and we have implemented this internal control and internal audit for the whole of the department. You will see the results.
Open. My name is Seymour Bashir. Sir, I want to ask from the panelists that we all know that there are so many entities, public sector entities, which are suffering from huge losses. So, what is your recommendation? How will be able to make the losses recovered and go into the profitable conditions? 156 state-owned enterprises, but they're all badly suffering losses. And as you mentioned that the educated lot is coming up, professionals are coming up, but they are working in the private sector. Public sector situation is before all of us. So how do you recommend that? That will be a bill, or next year we see some tremendous change, efficient ways to eradicate all that losses. Thank you.
Mr. Yusuf, can you please have a comment on that?
Yeah, that's a very important point you have raised. I believe that in terms of government policy, what we are seeing and we are really appreciating is that when we look at in terms of the success model of Germany, how we transformed from a sick man of Europe to one of the most super economic stars of today, their focus was into Fachhochschule, which is technical skills, vocational education. So if we look at in terms of, steel mills, we talk about other, public or, public sector companies, what we see is definitely there is an issue of obsolescence of the technical skill set. And, what we are now seeing is that the government has taken very seriously, and there is a lot of effort going on in terms of, real estate surveyors, land surveyors, quantity surveyors, draftsmen and so on. So what we are seeing is that, once that is there, number one, the right skill set is available. Number two, of course, we know that there was an issue in terms of, the 60-year confirmed service in the public sector. So whether you are performing or not, you are still issued your job, unlike the private sector. That certainly has, people have their legal rights. So again, what we have to do is that we have to create that mix of skill set and mix of legal rights and the right governance. I believe that's going to really address the issue. Coming to the human resources, for example, we have the civil servants coming from the CSS, but in the public sector, we've also seen the MP scales where, they take professionals from the market. And we've seen, for example, in the telecom sector, in the competition commission, in other areas as well, as more and more competent, seasoned, experienced professionals are taken into the decision making at the senior levels. We are seeing that yes, there is an impact. And I believe that as long as we take care and we make sure there is good governance happening within the public sector, people will be able to make that difference.
Thank you. So would you like to add something?
Yeah. Actually, it's about the good governance, rightly pointed out by Dr. Yusuf. I just want to add a few things. He mentioned that it's the civil services and the professional become. Let me be very clear. We talk of PIA, we talk of Pakistan Steel Mill. Those entities, they have heavy load of people on contract, professionals, technical people, civil services. It's a mix of all these. We need to understand that public sector is different from the commercial sector. There are different angles. We, as civil servants or the public sector, we never focus on the commercial angle of any organization. We are actually focusing on the service delivery. Nowhere in the world the government is doing business. It's the corporate sector, it's the private sector. So, but when these companies started, we need to just go back in history to see. That was the compulsion. We don't have the proper business and entities to fill in those gaps. So they started it. Now it's the time to these companies to be taken over by the private sector. So it's, he rightly pointed out there is a, 30 years or that once we retire, we don't move out of the service. That's right, but there are, PTCL is an example. It's one of the company, so they provide golden check, and so we can launch schemes like that. But once the private sector is ready to take over those business entities, which are actually making loss of billions to Pakistani government. Thank you very much.
Thanks for touching on the perils of nationalization for that matter. Do we have any other questions?
We have a question from an online attendee. The question is from the Office of the Auditor General. How can the Auditor General of Pakistan play its role in the audit of public-private partnerships? And does the office have the right skill set to do that?
Taking the last thing first. Yes, the 18th Amendment in the Constitution clearly mentions that initially it was that where the public money is there, we are there. Now, as per the Constitution, without any comment on the Constitution, The government auditor is there, even in the company, let me quote the words. The entity established with the intent of the government without any investment. This is my answer.
Very precise, thank you, sir. There's a question from the audience.
Yes, I've listened to the panelists and it's very interesting, Army and Auditor General and government, accountants. But the business of government is not to be in the business of business. However, the Army is a business. It's one of the biggest businesses in this country. You're not just a public entity, you're making money. So, your point I take exception to. It has to be another discussion. But in my considered opinion, as a private, individual who has done a lot of business in Asia, Pakistan is not a country on the moon. There's many countries in Asia. Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand. These are all countries which have done very well. There is a Malays in this country. In Urdu, we say Prapundi. There's a Prapundi here, and this has to be released. And that is, we cannot live for the future by what we've done in the past. All these public sector entities like PIA, Pakistan Steel Mill are dead. They're finished. Why? Because of incompetence, because of going on. Even entities like Sendak Mines in Balochistan, when Benazir was the Prime Minister, she had to pay millions, billions of rupees to keep it alive. So the time has come now to move on. These old ideas will not suffice. But Dr. Stein's premise of going into the future with artificial intelligence and taking care of these things is the future, and the youth of this country will not forgive you. You cannot do the past. Anyway, this is what I wanted to contribute, and I'm sure people will discuss it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and Faisal, you have given me the toughest job on this earth, honestly, standing between hungry souls and lunch. So I will quickly wind up. We would like to invite Mr. Sajid and
Mr. Ian Max to step on stage, please.
Please, sir. So first, we would request Mr. Irshad to receive this token of appreciation. We really appreciate your time, sir.
Sir, information on color. So lights and the spotlight. Which side?
Thank you, sir. Mr. Idris, Controller Military Accounts. Thank you for joining us, sir. Dr. Shahid Mahmood, Chairman and Group CEO, Interactive Group. We appreciate your time, sir. Thank you for your valuable input. A big round of applause for Dr. Shahid. Thank you so much. Mr. Yusuf Harun, Principal, Deloitte Consulting. Thank you, sir. Thank you for
and Farina, of course, our moderator and very dear friend, ACCA. Farina watches. And group photograph, please. Can I also have Zarif on the stage for the group photograph? Zarif, can you also step forward for the group photograph, please? We've now approached the final segment of this summit, which is a demonstration of ACCA's vision for this beloved country. And there is no person better than the head of ACCA Pakistan to present it to you. And I request Sajid Aslam please to share his thoughts about the country and ACCA's vision. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum and very good afternoon.
I hope you must have enjoyed the conversation, but our challenge is the conversation should not end here. That's the beginning of the conversation. There are ideas, there are initiatives which need to go forward. The one of the thought which always scare us is that as soon as we started talking about the technology as one of a key area implemented in the public sector, what would be the size of the government? What is the right size of the government and the institutions if we bring the technology? So once we talk about the reforms, and that's what Dr. Ishrat was talking this morning, technology has its role to play, and that will definitely changes the dimension and direction the way public sector operates today. The question now is not what we should do. We know that what we need to do. It's the question is when we should start implementing it. It's imperative, it's important. The public sector has to move on the technology. It has to bring that agility. We can defer it, we can delay it, but we cannot deny it. Currently, the way the public sector is, and for any government, I'm not talking about Pakistan specifically, that's highly dependent on the rules and the regulation and the legislation which are designed in 20th century based on 19th century experience. And if we want to move forward, I can come and say AGP, the way AGP work, it's not efficient. But they have to work in the legislative framework which they are provided with. The question does not start with the AGP. The question starts with the legislators. Question goes back to the parliament. You have seen one example what was shared from Pakistan Tobacco, both sides of it. And that is a public value project for us. It's a free of cost. We jumped on that particular opportunity because there are 500,000 families who are dependent on that tobacco crop. And that's a wonderful transition from opium to tobacco, and that's something which Pakistan came up back in the 60s. And that's now bringing something benefit in terms of providing the livelihood, the legal one, and also helping the exchequer. When you go back, I think one thing if you have picked up, their management is very proactive. They are trying to change the structure, the way they operate, and they are putting up the changes in their legislation which are not approved yet. So the reform agenda starts from one side is to have a principle-based regulation and the legislation rather than the rule-based, because things will change in 5 years, in the 10 years, in the 20 years. If we come up with the rules and our legislative process, which in any country will take year to 18 months at least with a proper public consultation, that's mean if we establish the principle, and then I go back to Dr. Shan's comment, anticipate what the governance requirement is, not the estimate based on the history, anticipate based on the pace and the velocity which we are operating in today's world. So our legislation and the policy framework should not develop to address some ills or corruption which were done in past. Because believe me, in a 5-year time, when we will be talking about, God forbid, about corruption, it will not be the way it used to be done in past. So the regulations which are required to address that are different. It's required a different mindset. Number two, the most important thing is ethical framework. Public services are based and designed to create public trust by using those services and having a very transparent view around it, where my money is being spent and is it spent effectively. When we start raising questions around the budget and the budget allocation, it's not because we really want to see a one allocation higher than the other and we start debating around it. There could be different allocations. But just giving you a one stat, right now we are spending 700 billion rupees, provincial and federal together, on education, public money, right? And right now, if you go on an economic survey in 1819, you will find that there are 15 million people starting from a preschool to the higher education who are in the process. And that brings it down $100 per person per year spending. So this is our budget on the education per person compared to US $11,000 per person per year, 100 versus 11,000. In China, the preschool spending is $1,400, and their higher education spending is $5,000 per person. This may remain the 700 billion. Can we change the way we deliver the education? Maybe. We can use $40, $50 per tablet to bring education in a different form. Could be. There are 267,000 institutions and the building which exist out there. There's a 1.8 million teachers who are deployed in the education sector. So if you go back to the infrastructure and you see that number, it's 28 people per teacher. It's 158 students per building. Is it the issue with the capacity? No, it's the issue with the intention, the capacity and the character of going back to what we are talking about. So it brings down to that ethical framework which is required to be implemented on me, or I have to implement that for myself as an individual, taking it to the family, bringing it to the society, and then bringing that back to the institutions. So I can't blame an institution if my practices myself are not using the same ethical and the governance compass which I would like others to see. Although the public sector will be more accountable for that, and they are designed in a structure that they are supposed to be really leading that way, but ethical considerations are fundamental for strategic business leaders if we want an inclusive growth, not the fastest growth. And that will come down to fundamentals of deploying technology using the same 700 billion rupees, but more effectively. What does it mean for people? What does it mean for the existing infrastructure? They have to evolve with it. Otherwise, they will dissolve at one point of time because people need education and they will figure it out how to do that. Then the last point I would like to bring to the table from a public sector. We can ask, and Swetsab is sitting there, Swetsab can go and ask for an investment from a high net worth individual that they should invest with Swetsab. But what they need, they have to ask for it. They will never make that investment unless until there is a cross factor there. Now we can talk about expanding the base of tax. It's never going to happen because the fundamental which require the base expansion is the cost. The one thing which really kills the economy is the higher tax rate, and we are moving that towards that successively over the period. And the other thing which never helps is the foreign aid. It's always the lower tax rate which helps in a capital formation. And unless until there's a private capital formation, the investment will not come. And the public-private partnership, when we talk about it, unless until there is enough local capital available,
we will not be able to see a success even on that model. So on private-public partnership, there's a trust factor, there's a tax rates which is there's a capital formation which is required. And that will require the government to trust citizens, government asking citizens to trust back to the public sector and pay taxes. At the same time, when the business community goes back and asks for, trust us, lower the tax, and in 2-3 years the base will expand, government might not have that fiscal space really to bring that trust relationship back to citizens. So it's a two-way relationship, and that will be based on the transparency, the data which we will be shared, the technology, the accessibility, the connectivity. So the 21st century public financial management has a different role to play, particularly the countries like us. And the fundamental role which we can play is all around building that trust between citizens and the government and vice versa. It's not a one-way. It's not because there's a regulator and there's a government, they have authority. Trust does not work like that. We have seen those policies over the period, and the tax base is not expanding. The private capital formation, if it's happening anywhere, it's not staying in Pakistan. That trust, that confidence has to be developed using that public spending, which is over 4 or 5 trillion, and we have to spend it wisely, and we have to really expose the public that where this money has been spent and how it's creating a value for them. Public financial management for me in 21st century is about the speed, the velocity, transparency, and building that trust where that citizen and government can enjoy that relationship, and we can see that GDP grow. On this note, I would like to share one video, I would say. ACCA members came out 2 years back with a certain vision around Pakistan, how they really want to see Pakistan and how they want to contribute. And that's not coming from the private sector. That's basically working together, talking about the inclusive, not the fastest, but the inclusive growth, which is sustainable and which help us to grow at a certain level where everybody can benefit out of it. So I would like to share that video. And on that note, while Faisal will be playing that video, I would like to thank everybody for their participation, and specifically our people, our colleagues, and our participants who have joined us from different regions, different countries online, and they really stayed that long. We really, really appreciate them, and we would like them to be ambassadors for Pakistan, contribute private sector like we contributed here. We would like our expat Pakistani to contribute in terms of their intellectual capital. We might need their money, but we definitely need their intellectual capital. Provide that guidance. There are frameworks, and when you will follow through that, definitely it will come up with a policy, or your contribution will form some legislation. It may take longer, like Ajay said, but it has a definite destiny provided you start contributing. And that contribution is important for us. So here I leave you. Thank you very much, and we will go back to the video. Thank you.
पाकिस्तान एक ख्वाब अनूठ जज्बों और लाजवाब उमंगों से जिसकी ताबीर मुमकिन हुई। पाकिस्तान एक गुलिस्तान उम्मीद का लाखों ने जिसकी अपने लहू से आग बहाली की। तामीर चमन से तामीर वतन का आगाज हुआ। इसकी बुनियादों में शामिल हमारी अथक मेहनत और लगन, जिससे तरक्की का सफर हुआ तेज से तेज तर। हमारी कुव्वत इरादी बनी हमारी पहचान, और दुनिया में ऊंचा हुआ पाकिस्तान का नाम। कारवां जारी है जाने के मंजिल से, कठिन सफर है हमें नहीं है पता, नया सूरज यहीं से उभरेगा, खुशहाली का चश्मा यहीं से घूटेगा, इल्म हुनर से हर सू चराहा हो रहा है, तामीर वतन का जज्बा फरामा हो रहा है, हमारी महारतों की है दुनिया मोतरफ, हम तस्दीक कर रहे हैं नए उफक, ये देश बनेगा रहबरे तरक्की और कमाल, रहती दुनिया देगी जिसकी मिसाल।
And this brings us to the end of the summit. I'm thankful to all the participants, especially to Ian and Zarif for making the journey, and very especially to my ACCA colleagues who supported in executing the event and making it a great success. Please join us for the networking lunch, which is being served at the back of the hall. Stay blessed. Pakistan Zindabad. Thank you.